Big Week in Gaming, a podcast that dives into gaming news, analysis, and reviews. If you'd like to help contribute to the growth of this podcast and community, please leave us a 5-star review, as it helps people find us. With that said, let's get on with the show.
Shut up! Big Week's on the radio! Shut up! It's Gaming Podcast Audio!
Welcome. It's been a big week in gaming. I'm integot, he's Swinny, for episode 3 on Sunday, the 2nd of August, 2020. In this week's show, we'll be discussing the announcement of the pre-order for the Analogue Pocket, yes. Further leaks from Nintendo, and Swinny's thoughts on Konami. First off, Swinny, I just wanted to say happy long weekend.
Yes, totally.
So, just for the context, and this is like the most ridiculous thing, but in Australia, I think it's the east coast of Australia, we have a thing called bank holiday. So if you work at a bank, you get a public holiday and no one else gets it. And it's legitimately the greatest holiday ever. I love it.
It reminds me of my whole get your shit done day idea, where the immediate counter is, hey, it's basically the concept is everyone should just get a day off once per year to get the stuff done, like get the taxes done and do things like that. And the immediate counter is always, well, what about the people that work at the post office and the tax agents and everything? It's like, well, they get a different day off. So there you go. Like it's already out there. We just need to reapply the other side of things.
Well, we're trying to start it. We're just, us bankers, we really think of other people. So we want to lead from the front and have a day off for ourselves. Maybe one solution to it is you should get a day off on your birthday. I wonder if any country does that.
I think some countries do it, but they give everyone the same birthday for that holiday. So it's kind of besides the point. It's just another public holiday at that point.
I guess it's like, but if you work somewhere, you have to show your birthday. So they would know your birthday. So, that's like a legitimate way to go, okay, well then that's how we're going to decide if, we give you that day off or not. Well, not that it would be a choice if it was a public holiday for your birthday. I do like your idea of having a day off, like a sequence day off for everyone to go and do stuff. Well, because it feels like sometimes you just go, oh, okay, when am I supposed to buy a suit? And by the way, bank holiday, that's what people used to do. That was the day when you go and, get a suit or do anything like that. And I have to say, just quickly, in Australia, there was a royal commission into the banks, so it's similar to like Congress investigating the banks. It was quite serious. And I think a lot of people internally thought, wow, okay, this is going to be gone. this public holiday, it's not going to survive it. And it did actually survive it amazingly. So I'm not sure if it's ever going to go away. It's the most ridiculous public holiday ever. I love it.
Well, back to your birthday idea. What about the poor people born on only, February 29th? What about them?
Well, okay. So on that, what's the code? What is the code? Do you celebrate it the day before or the day after? What would you do if you're in that scenario?
I think you'd probably try to get credit for it on both days.
I wasn't expecting that answer. Of course you're going to give me an answer like that. What do you mean credit on both days?
You try to
what are you talking about?
You tell some people, oh, it's my birthday today and it's the 28th, and then some other people say, oh, it's my birthday today, it's the 1st of March. It's like you try to stretch it, you get the most out of it.
So my theory is it surely should be the day after, because it's kind of gone past that day, you know what I mean? And then it's your birthday or something. I don't know. It's a tough one, isn't it? Well, it feels more natural if it's February, because if your birthday is February 29.
It's like the question you asked me yesterday about when is midnight. Don't try to bring actual common sense into this.
Oh yeah. Let's ask the audience.
You got to make the choice by heart.
We should. Okay, so if anyone's listening to this, when is midnight? So this podcast is coming out on Sunday. And from our perspective on Sunday, is Sunday midnight in the future or is it in the past? Now, Swinny got the wrong answer, of course.
I don't treat midnight as an exact period of time. It's
Oh my
it's an
God.
estimate based on personal preference.
It just reminds me of the conversation I had with my mom about this, where she was saying, "Well, we don't think of it as, on the like, so midnight is at the start of the day. So for Sunday, it's basically Saturday night, 11:59, and then it goes to Sunday midnight." But my mom was trying to argue that, yeah, that's your definition, but we don't think of it like that.
Yeah,
I'm just like, it's a definition. Like you can't change a definition. It's not your own
That's
truth.
the exact kind of answer I would give as well. Yeah, it may be technically right, but it's not my opinion.
And actually, talking about midnight, and I'll just segue into the next topic because I had to stay up past midnight to see what the announcement was of the Analogue Pocket. So as I suspected and flagged last week, the Analogue Pocket, there was a date basically, as we called out last week, and it was in Australian time 1 a.m. So I actually didn't think that they were going to go on sale, the Analogue Pocket, at that time. So I was actually just in bed on my iPad, and I was like ready to run to my PC if something went awry, like I couldn't log in to a store if they did offer it. But yeah, they did reveal. So essentially they announced another announcement, which annoyed a lot of people. I think it's fine. I think it means that people can go through all the information and understand what they want to do. So essentially the pre-orders for the Analogue Pocket start on Monday, the 3rd of August at 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, which is tomorrow from the time of publishing, 4 p.m. British summertime, and then in Australian Eastern Standard Time, Sydney, Melbourne, it's Tuesday, the 4th of August, 1 a.m. So it's about a day and a bit. The Analogue Pocket itself is going to be $200 US, which is about 280 Australian dollars. $100 for the Analogue Dock, so that's about $140 Australian. And I actually did check the shipping to Australia for sort of like a similar product from Analogue, and it worked out to be about 140 Australian dollars, which is like very, very punishing, of course. And these things ship in May 2021, and they have a limit of 2 per person. Now, like, there's heaps of features and things I want to jump into, but like Swinny, like your impressions, because there were some new announcements. It's a bit of a refresh thing. What did you think of it?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't even near my mic because you've got like a high school essay size amount of notes on this thing. And I'm like, I'm just gonna go make a coffee and then come back when you've like been through. No, it looks amazing. I know we've seen it before. In some kind of at least like pre-rendered screenshots. Is that correct? Like it's something we've seen before.
Okay, like, as I said, as I said last time, I'm really deep on this community. Like I'm in the Discord subreddit, like everything about it. So there was a tweet from someone like who designed the Analogue Pocket, who had a prototype version, and they'd taken a photo and sent it to a friend on Twitter. So it was a public tweet, but it was like a public tweet in a, non-public thread, if that makes any sense. So it's just like a little thread back and forth. And he's like, oh, hey, have a look at this. And then some people in the community found it, and it was like, oh my God, it's the first time we've actually seen what it looks like outside of a render. And then they took that tweet down. But of course, being the internet, they'd saved that photo. So with the exception of that, yes, it's always been pre-rendered images of the Pocket.
Yeah, so I remember seeing the pre-rendered. I'm obviously not as deep on analog as you are, but yeah. I did see that at the time because it did make news, and I remember thinking, oh, that's amazing. I'm probably never going to get one for various reasons, but it would be awesome. I do have a lot of Game Boy Advance specifically, but I've got a bunch of Game Boy games, Game Boy Advance, that I'd love to have a really nice system to play them on. I used to use my original Nintendo DS for my Game Boy Advance games. I never actually had a Game Boy Advance, so it's weird that I've got so many of them. But that kind of thing, I bit the dust a while back. But honestly, it's it looks great. What can I say? Yeah, and from everything I've seen, that you're probably going to get into some more details. It like even the dock, just the form factor, and yeah, it looks awesome.
Yeah, and for me, this was really, like, honestly, probably the dream product for me, and I was like waiting for Analogue to make something like this. It's always kind of been a bit rumored from them, so they've actually had a really long history. They started off making Neo Geo, actually, like, not, and I don't want to use the word clone systems, but it's almost like replication systems. So they're using either actual hardware, so they, with the NES replication machine, so the mini NT, there was a time where they were actually taking the boards and like manipulating the boards and putting their own like processors on top of it and getting it to pump out into HDMI and doing lots of really, really cool stuff. And I'd always wanted them to make a Pocket or like something like this, just because, like, I'm probably more, in a weird way, of a handheld gamer than a console gamer. I've always loved handheld so much. I was obsessed about DS. I love my 3DS. And, this system being a, Game Boy Pocket style sort of form factor, being able to play Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance cartridges, obviously no emulation, it's all FPGA stuff. And then the screen is just insane. So for me, like, as much as people go, oh, the cost, and the cost is really high in Australia because of the shipping. But if you're in the US, it depends how you are and how you're wired. For me, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I love things being, like original quality as much as possible, or, scaling properly, doing all this kind of stuff. Like, I get obsessed about that. And it really annoys me with the 3DS that, if you plug in a Game Boy Advance game, it's not quite the same resolution. And then you get all these weird artifacts, or you play it in the original mode, but then the screen's a bit too small. And just to call that out, like with this machine, the resolution of the screen is insane. It's 1600 by 1440 pixels. And because it's like, so that's 10x the original Game Boy screen. So for every 1 pixel on the Game Boy screen, it's like 10 by 10. So there's literally 100 pixels representing 1 pixel, like on a Game Boy screen. But what that allows them is the flexibility to be able to, make the screen and the scalars representative to like Game Gear or Neo Geo Pocket or the Game Boy Advance, Game Boy. And then also they are allowed to do variable refresh rates on this display. So it's like literally, like, everything leading up to this, I was super, super pumped, and I was more than happy to get it. And the only thing that was bugging me was that the original design, the button placement for the home button and the start select essentially was like in the bottom right. And it was just like, oh, you felt like, you could be touching that or like accidentally pressing it. And they actually changed that and moved it to the center, which to me is just another illustration of the company and, how they're willing to like listen to the community and respond to the feedback. And then just other, yeah, go on, sorry.
You said about price. This is not the kind of product that is going to be sold on Big W stores or anything like that. No. This is a niche collector, enthusiast product. And also just, probably more about this than I do, but just from the economies of scale, like the production side of things, it makes sense that it's priced where it's at. Now, does that price a bunch of people out that probably would love it? Yes, it does, because, it is fairly expensive, especially if you're having to ship it to Australia. But, like any criticism beyond that, I think people just have an unrealistic expectation of what this product is.
Yeah, and like the thing that I would always say is kind of, what's the alternative? Because if you're wanting to argue, okay, I want something similar to this and I can get it for much cheaper, well, show me what it is. Because, if you go back to things like, the Game Boy Advance itself, the backlit, and even the backlit screens of the AGS 101 models, where they had those backlit screens for the Game Boy Advances, the SPs, like to actually modify them, buy one, get the screen, do all the work. And then, by the way, you're still stuck with this sort of battery technology. So then you've got to potentially go install a third-party battery into it that's rechargeable, and you actually do all the numbers, and you end up with a number potentially even higher than this. And to me, like getting something like this where, you know, it's designed from the ground up, and honestly, like the aesthetic and the design is just off the charts for me. It's actually very reminiscent of something like Apple, where it's like just very high quality. You can tell that a lot of thought has gone into it. And you know, it's just, I don't know. I was super buzzing after this, because I was like, wow, they've actually improved things that I even wanted them to improve. And they've also released other details. So for instance, they didn't announce this when it first came out, but there's a sleep and wake function. So basically pressing the power button, you can suspend the gameplay, and it basically turns the display off. And then, you know, you can pick it up straight away again after that. Now, it's probably the one thing that I'm not so sure about, because in all the materials, and I read through it really closely, and you'd like this, Swinny, I read through it so carefully, I actually noticed a typo in one of their documents, and I reached out to them, and then they came back to me and go, oh, thanks, we're going to fix it.
I saw the note about that in the run sheet, and I thought that is the nerdiest note I've ever seen. You reached out to get them to fix a misspelling.
No, like, to be clear, I wasn't saying you should fix this. I just said FYI, just so you know. You know, and like, I'm a perfectionist. I get it. And I feel like this company is a bit of a perfectionist. And I'm sure they're like, oh, well, no, you got to fix that. We can't have a typo in a document. That's just unacceptable. The other thing that was really cool with the dock is that they've also announced that the connectivity to the dock. So the whole idea of the dock is you slot in the Analogue Pocket, and then it can display it on a TV, which is pretty much exactly the same concept as a Nintendo Switch. But what you can do is you can actually connect via Bluetooth, like from a controller perspective. So if you have a 8-bit DO controller that's Bluetooth, it will connect to that. But then there's also these new controllers from 8-bit DO that are 2.4G. So the reason why that's interesting is just because they have extremely low input latency. So it's really much like playing with a wired controller, and you can also plug wired controllers into it, and it has like about 4-player support. The other things,
all those
go on.
All those Mortal Kombat Game Boy esports players are going to be very happy about that.
Or Street Fighter, right? That's right. And just, you know, I could literally, and I've got to pull myself up, you know, I could rattle on about this whole thing and everything that it does, but just probably to cover some of the other major things that weren't known prior to this. So Game Boy Studio, which is a little indie project, they're actually going to have a version 2 of that. And basically it's a software that you can create your own Game Boy games. And it's very plug and play, drag and drop. I've actually checked it out. It's on itch.io. And it's actually really, really cool. It's a bit like RPG Maker. So they're releasing a new version of that. And the cool thing is it's going to create like Game Boy ROMs that can be played on the Analogue Pocket. So even potentially down the track, you could actually have a run of like homebrew games, or, you know, you could create your own cartridges that could just slot into an original Game Boy. And then the other thing that they opened up is a developer program. So you can actually create your own cores, or you could bring over like the Super Nintendo cores that already exist, or the Genesis ones, and turn this into a portable Super Nintendo machine. And then finally, last couple of things I thought were really cool. You can support Tate mode, so you can actually spin the screen in any direction. And because you can use it with the dock, that means that, you know, if you flipped your CRT, you could play like those kind of games in that mode, which is pretty sick. And then finally, it does have a headphone jack. So although it does have that Apple aesthetic, it doesn't have their view on some of the hardware choices that they've made. So yeah, like, I'm super pumped about this. I'm like, yeah, I'm just over the moon. I literally couldn't sleep for like hours after this got announced, which was really annoying because it was like 1 a.m.
But they haven't answered the big questions.
Which is what?
The questions that Swinny wants to know.
Yes, go on.
Does it support the Game Boy camera and printer?
It's actually a really good question. So, yes, it should be able to. Now, the question that I have just quickly is, how big is the Game Boy camera? Like, what's the shape of the cartridge? And like, how would it slot in?
I believe it was the size of a normal cartridge, but then the head of the camera protruded from the top of the Game Boy.
So I'm not sure, man. I'm not sure.
Okay,
I'm not sure.
That's question one. You got to find that out for next week. You've got.
Well, I don't know if
you've
we'll be
got
able to.
connections with them, so they owe you one. You fix
I'll
their
reach out to them.
you fix their typo. They owe you one. Question number 2: Will it support Boktai? The sun is in your hands. That classic Hideo Kojima game on Game Boy Advance. That's what I want to know. And lastly,
wait! I don't know what that game is.
Oh, you uncultured swine! Dost thou not know of Boktai? Boktai was like an action RPG adventure game on the Game Boy Advance that used the sun as a gimmick on on the cartridge.
I do know this game, actually. I do know this game. I've never heard it. I've only read it. It would support it.
Okay, and my last question, will it support... there's 2 games here. Kirby's Turn and Tilt, or whatever it's called, and WarioWare Tilted.
Yes, it should. It should. So, like, the key is just, like, is the cartridge... Like, how is the cartridge shaped? Like, is it shaped in such a way that... You know, that's the one thing about the Game Boy camera. I'll have to reach out to them and find out. Because of the length of it, I'm not so sure, actually. It might, actually. Because I have seen... Oh, maybe not. Because when I think about the images, I don't think it's that flush. I think it's a little bit lower, the Game Boy cartridge in the slot.
Because you may think Swinny is joking here, and I don't know why I'm talking third person all of a sudden. Think about it. If someone wanted to emulate those games, they like, I'm sure there's a solution out there, but it's not how the game was intended. Like, you need the hardware for that, you know. I'm sure that you could probably emulate WarioWare on a mobile phone, and there you go, it's got a gyroscope in there or whatever, right? But Boktai, what mobile phone is able to probably like replicate the sun sensor? So jokes aside, like, I think that's actually going to be interesting to see, like, from the Game Boy camera standpoint. Not that people probably care that much about it, but, you know, I'm sure there's niche communities out there that still like make cool art with it, just like they use Game Boys for like synth music and stuff. And from what I've seen, the Analogue Pocket's kind of in that, gonna have some inbuilt synthesizer or something for that, isn't it?
Yeah, it has a whole, you know, and that's another thing I could spend hours on. It has a whole digital audio workstation, so, and it can act as a synthesizer and a sequencer. So you can plug this, and the cool thing is they've actually released, or they're releasing, a whole bunch of cables that support MIDI controllers and other types of controllers. So you can plug it into your like laptop or into like a physical, MIDI setup, or, you know, like different controllers and sync cables. It's like insane, like what the options are. It's actually, I'm like super tempted to order some of the cables with it, because I was getting into FamiTracker, which is the Famicom tracker where you can actually do chip tunes. So, because there is even a small part of me that I might have a crack at making a chiptune version of the Big Wig intro as the backing track, and keep the audio, like the singing that you do on it.
Spoil it.
Now, okay, so just like live feedback, I'm looking at the cartridge, and the Game Boy cartridges are flush. So I actually think the Game Boy camera would work on it.
There you go.
So that would be sick. I have to say, that would be... I think my wife actually has a Game Boy camera still.
They need to make
I'll test it in May 2021. Put a calendar invite in my diary.
They need to make a Game Boy camera analog. It's like a Gorilla Glass. It's like, it's, you know, it's FPGA inside of it, you know.
And maybe just to round it out, so just going on about what because it's getting sick, what I'll be ordering on Tuesday in the morning or Monday night. I'm surely not going to go to sleep for it. So do you want to actually have a guess what I'll order? So if you go to analog.co store, they'll actually have the link. Or if you even click the link in the show notes on our end.
All right.
I just want you to have a bit of a guess as to what you think I'll order.
I'm bringing it up, but first of all, before the link even opens, I know one thing that's going to be on that order. Said limit of 2 per person, so there's going to be 1 for me. I know that.
Well, I am ordering 2.
Okay, so I'm on the page now. Oh man,
Yeah.
this thing looks so schmick. It's
I know.
insane. It is insane.
It really is. It's like, it's almost better than some of the actual big hardware companies.
Man, that GIF, that little video of playing Mega Man. Oh, man, I used to have Mega Man, I think Mega Man 2 on Game Boy. That game was awesome.
Well, you know, like, because the later Mega Mans, like Mega Man 5, it's like a different game. And it's actually a legit good game, so...
Oh, yeah, it actually was really good. All right, I don't know what I'm looking for. What am I looking for? The store?
Oh, so if you go to menu and then just click store.
Okay, I'm on the store.
Or do you want me to just rattle off, or do you want to have a crack?
I reckon you're going to get one of each color, first of all.
Correct. Ding, ding. Yeah. So I go 1 point.
You're going to get... Oh my god, this is where... You're going to get 1 dock.
Yep.
You're going to get...
Just one.
You're going to get 2 hard cases.
Oh, so I was only going to get 1, but I think I actually will get 2.
I don't know if you'll get the screen protectors because you probably think you might be able to get them cheaper somewhere else.
So so this is a personal thing. I don't use screen protectors. So I don't have a screen protector on my iPhone. Now, I do have a screen protector on my Switch, but the Switch has a plastic screen. And that was another thing that they announced in these announcements. They're actually using Gorilla Glass for their screens, the latest version of Gorilla Glass. So they're going to be really scratch resistant and, like, you know, aren't likely to shatter. So my theory is, like, it doesn't really make sense for me to get a screen protector because I don't know one single person who's ever replaced a screen protector because the screen protector's a bit scratched. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So I just don't see the point in it. Okay. So no, I'm not going to order those.
Thank you for that dialogue about screen protectors.
Well, this is like, honestly, I cannot explain. This is like the biggest announcement for me this year in gaming. Okay. This is like, I'm so excited about this, man.
Everybody to the official Screen Protector podcast. Okay, all right. I don't know if you're going to get a power supply.
No.
Nah, didn't think so. You'll probably get the Game Gear adapter.
I'd say I was on the fence about it. I don't know. You reckon I should? I feel like I should for just, there's a big story about me getting a Game Gear when I was a kid.
Can you
so
play?
Maybe
would you be able to play Master System games on the Game Gear adapter?
I think you would, actually.
Then I reckon it's probably good because there's a lot of great Master System games. And that's probably it. Oh, maybe a pocket to pocket.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the pocket to pocket one, so they're actually got a link cable, and these are the link cables that allow you to plug in like a pocket to another pocket, of course, or a pocket to a Game Boy Color or a Game Boy Pocket or a Game Boy Advance. Like, they're the link cable that's like a universal link cable.
Awesome.
I don't know if you know anything about the link cables with the Game Boys, but they're all very specific and very different. Like, a lot of them they're not compatible with each other.
I do not know, and honestly, I do not
care.
Thank you.
Now, the biggest one that's tricky for me is all the MIDI stuff. Like, do I get that stuff? I don't know. I don't have any of this stuff, so I feel like I probably know.
Look, chances are you'll probably be able to get something that's going to be able to do it in the future anyway. If you really want to.
I don't know. Can you? Because isn't it, like, proprietary?
Why are you asking me? You're the person that's written an essay about this stuff.
Okay, so this is the final thing I need to decide, because the problem is, if I ever want to do this stuff, and like I said, I was playing around with FamiTracker and, doing all that stuff around, coding that stuff, and I thought that's pretty fun. This thing is like hardcore built for that synthesizer stuff. I look at it and I go, geez, like, if I want to get into this later, the shipping to Australia is going to kill me. You know what I mean? But it's like $100 if I get all these cables. I don't know. I'll decide.
Look,
I'll decide on bank holiday. I feel like a fat cat or something.
Use the money you would have bought a suit with for this.
Yeah. So look, I'm super pumped. Like, what color would you choose if I'm not buying you one, but what color would you choose if you got one?
Damn, Damn it! That's how you tell me. Oh, I'm shattered. I mean, they both look pretty cool, but I'd probably go with the white because it reminds me more of like the Game Boy mic. No, what is it? Game Boy Pocket. I know that's silver, but that's the thing that it like the form factor reminds me of the Game Boy Pocket.
Well, that was actually my first Game Boy, the Game Boy Pocket, and I loved that thing. And I had a silver one. I am getting both, but I think I'll take the black one. And it's kind of weird because I do actually have all of my handheld consoles. Almost every single one is white, and I've always picked the white option. But I find that I play more at night now than I did when I was younger, and the white doesn't work as well as the black in terms of stopping reflections and all that kind of stuff. It's just like better to play on a all black screen. So yeah. So that rounds out Analogue Pocket. I'm kind of sad because there's not going to be any other news on Analogue Pocket now, and it's going to be ages until these things ship. And just quickly, there was a lot of, I guess a lot of people quite annoyed in the community just around, they're announcing the pre-order now and it's not shipping until May 2021. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, just quickly, I think, I'd rather know now and just go, okay, we're going to buy it now. And then they make as many as they need to based on the demand. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. So it doesn't really surprise me that much that it's May 2021.
Look, be happy this even exists.
Fair call. Well, in other news that is about being happy that things exist and we now know about it, we did talk about leaks last week, Nintendo leaks, and then this week we've also found out that there's further leaks, often referred to as a Gigaleak. So last time it was really more about Super Nintendo. This time it seems about Nintendo 64, and there are actual rumors that there's further things to come out very shortly, actually. And it just seems like someone's sitting on a treasure trove of information. And again, we didn't mention it last week, but I will probably mention it every single time something like this comes up. We certainly don't condone this, and definitely don't encourage it. And I actually think if anyone does have this information, they shouldn't share it. But it is out there now, and that is in the public. And there was some really, really interesting stuff that came out. And was there anything that really caught your eye, Swinny?
So definitely. I mean, the big one that this week that a lot of people talked about is Luigi in Super Mario 64. And
Luigi is real.
Yeah, I remember, in that Byuu's courtyard, there's the statue with the engraving. Everyone's like, oh, L is something, what can we do to unlock Luigi? All these gaming myths. And it's good to know, finally, that he was there. There's no way to get him, but people have been able to actually replace him and into the game because they've got access to the source code as well, which is insane. And they're actually running around as Luigi in his Super Mario 64 model around Mario 64. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and on that, and look, this kind of stuff is so full of misinformation. It's just incredible. The amount of stuff out there that's not correct on it. Just on the Luigi stuff, and just for everyone who's listening, I'd actually encourage people to jump on Modern Vintage Gamer, so MVG. There's a really good YouTuber, and he covers a lot of modding stuff, and he has really, really great videos on this, and I'm sure he's going to publish a lot in the future, because this is right in his wheelhouse. And, he had a really good point, and I agree, and I sort of, had thought about it as well around the Luigi stuff, because people are kind of now describing it as Luigi is in Mario 64, which is not correct at all. So, if you look at the Mario 64 that we got, Luigi is not on there. You know what I mean? It's not like Luigi's buried in the code or buried in the ROM or buried in a file on that game or anything like that. He was, there was a model, and they've recreated the model, which is really sick, but the actual thing was never coded in. It was never incorporated in the code. There was no make files to be able to, compile that. So I think it's a bit disingenuous that people are saying, he was in the game. He certainly was, and let's be real, Shigeru Miyamoto, all the way back to 96, I think it was, or 95, actually said that they were experimenting about putting Luigi in the game. So it's not like this was unknown information. But yeah, seeing the model itself is really, really cool.
And you'd be great at, at parties like this. Like, seriously, do you have to split hairs on this stuff? They found the model that was designed for Mario 64. Let people have that. Bloody hell.
I'm not taking it away.
Yeah, okay. So some other stuff. There's, we've obviously Zelda we've known about for a while, which was, I believe, was that was the one that was meant to be delivered via satellite. It was like an upgraded version, I believe, of Zelda.
I thought it was 64DD.
No, so I believe 64DD was a different version.
Really?
That was my understanding. So Zelda is not the 64DD. I believe it was a different version. I could be wrong on that.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, like there's some prototype, I guess.
No, you are wrong. I just checked it. It goes, Zelda was a Nintendo 64 disc drive expansion.
So that was
disc
the
designed
DD,
for
okay.
Ocarina of Time.
So okay, all right. So, yeah, I'm cool to be wrong every now and then. It happens.
No, it doesn't. But yeah, go on.
So some other cool stuff.
But wait, can we pause a second? Because I always hear about Zelda, and I never really know what it is.
Well,
it's just like an expanded version of Ocarina of Time, right?
Correct.
Like more dungeons or something, yeah.
Yeah, so it was just they had extra, I guess, memory to work with or whatever the 64DD was doing. So they thought they'd do an upgraded version, and with the fact that the 64DD didn't have a long lifespan, they obviously canned it after the first bunch of titles they released in Japan. But I mean, we got essentially, like a bunch of weird characters that came out of it that, have shown up in Smash Brothers trophies and things like that. So, but some other cool stuff, they've apparently, I don't know where they got this from, but there's some clear audio of Lilac Wars voice lines.
Oh, this was so crazy.
Yeah, and to PAL territories, that's Star Fox 64. So specifically the classic dual barrel line from Peppy Hare. So that's really cool. But there's also a bunch of other audio stuff that they found, such as some of the voice actors from Mario and Peach saying potential different Mario Advance lines. So I can't remember the exact title. I think it was Super Mario Advance Mario 2 or something like that.
Can't you get it straight? Mario Advance being Super Mario Brothers 2 and Mario Advance 2 being Super Mario 4, Super Mario World, or whatever it is.
It's insane. But hey,
it's the most ridiculous, convoluted.
I played Super Mario Advance heaps when they put it out, so it was good. I think it was good for them to start Mario 2 anyway. But yeah, saying different versions of that. There's a bunch of weird stuff though. Like there's some cool unused art, or early art sprites for Mario with wings in Mario World and Luigi flipping the bird or like using his middle finger at least, and like Yoshi, early potential versions of Yoshi, and just some weird stuff.
They were cool.
But one of the weirdest things for me was the fact that they found what is very clearly meant to be Beavis from Beavis and Butthead in F-Zero X, which is like...
So I didn't know about this.
It's the weirdest
thing. So I only
thing.
knew this when you called it out, yeah.
And it's like, who else could it be? Like, it looks exactly like Beavis. But there's some weird stuff. Like, even there's like that weird balcony graphic. It's like 2D isometric with a whole bunch of Mario characters. Toad is like smoking. Mario's naked. It's just super weird. When I say Mario's naked, there's a balcony in front of him, but no one knows what that was used for. And assuming it's real, I'm guessing it's probably, if it's not for a game, then it's probably for like a magazine graphic or something like, Famitsu or Nintendo Power or something like that. But just some really weird stuff. But it's kind of cool. But there's definitely a part of me that, like, I didn't actually look up a lot of this stuff. It was hard to avoid the Luigi stuff, but I didn't go out of my way to look at any of this until I realized that, hey, we should talk about this on the podcast. So for me, there's an element, and it's the same with the YouTube channels like your Beta 64 and things like that, where I kind of don't want to know how the sausage is made sometimes.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, I'm kind of like a little bit different. Like I just feel like, the whole point of the art form is you do a lot of work, and it's that analogy of like a duck on water. Like there's a lot of stuff that goes underneath the surface, but you just want a smooth thing on the top. And I feel like, a lot of this production stuff, where they're working on things and experimenting with ideas, it's not actually, the reason why it doesn't get out there is because it's to them not their best work, So they don't actually really want people to see it or listen to it or play it or do all those kinds of things, because they're like, oh, you know what, we don't actually think it's good, or it's just a prototype or a vertical slice we put together. And I don't know, it feels like, if I was creating this stuff, I'd be a bit annoyed, because it's like, well, there's a reason why it wasn't in the game, because we didn't like it, and it kind of maybe tarnishes or, has a weird perspective on what you're doing and, how people have received it. I don't know. It's not something I would hunt out and encourage, but it is really crazy seeing some of the stuff. And there's like other stuff that we probably won't go into, but again, because it's coming directly from their corporate network or something like that, it has all the really random stuff that you see normally, like on a corporate network, and including inappropriate things that have unfortunately been included in the archive.
Yeah, and I will say probably my favourite thing actually is, just because I'm such a huge fan of the game, but with Yoshi's Island, we mentioned last week that there's prototype versions of that, but there's some sprite assets showing, if anyone remembers, Yoshi's Island has almost like a crayon style art style, and around a lot of the terrain, there's really thick black lines. And they have like a sprite sheet that has that, and then a sprite sheet where it has just like 1 pixel lines, almost like close to the Super Mario World or something like that. And it just goes to show that, like how such a, like, them going out on a limb, because honestly, like, it was risky to kind of experiment with an art style, especially that early on. They do it all the time now, but it just goes to show that, the process where you're like, well, rather than be conventional, let's try something different. And that's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think there's some conflation in this Gigaleak where people were sort of going, oh, now that they have the source code for Mario 64, we could do whatever we want with it. And the actual reality is a lot of the files are just empty. So it sort of says that's the file, but it doesn't have any data. So a lot of the games you can't reconstruct anyway. And there's already been a lot of work, especially on Mario 64 recently. There was a decompilation program. So basically, it's taking the ROM, and they've worked out a way to reverse engineer it and basically come up with the source code independently. And then they've actually ported that to PC. And then just over the last few days, they've actually ported it to the 3DS. And I think that kind of stuff is really cool. And like the work you need to do for that to reverse engineer it, it's all actually, work that they're doing without this information. So like one part of it for me is like, I just hope it doesn't threaten those type of projects where it's actually people being creative and trying to do this really hard endeavor rather than just stealing the information and getting a leg up that way.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where the legal stuff lands on this, because I mean, it's out there, you kind of, can't stop the floodgates now, but there's definitely, investigations being made about how this happened, and I reckon there'll be hell to pay for certain people if they can discover.
Oh yeah, definitely. And switching from very retro news and then flipping right into more modern stuff, Halo Infinite. So there's actually been a really interesting update around Halo Infinite. So initially it came out as a bit of a leak and a question around. There was a conversation from the Smith's Toys website just sort of saying that the multiplayer would be free to play and also support 120 frames per second. And, at first people were like, oh no, is this actually right? And no, Microsoft actually came out and confirmed that Halo Infinite is going free to play for multiplayer, which is really, really interesting. What did you think of this as the Xbox person of the two of us?
I'm the Xbox person. So I'm a little of two minds of this. I think I think it has potential to be great. Really build a really big community. But with Game Pass, I thought, well, they're kind of already there because essentially for a lot of people, they obviously there's a cost to Game Pass, but for the people that already have it, it's almost like the games on there are almost free. It's weird, like the weird mindset.
Exactly.
But I mean, to be clear as well, yeah, it is just the multiplayer, not the campaign, which is interesting because I think they put the Forge mode of Halo 5, I think it is, on Windows Store at some point, and that was free. So it's not the first time they've tried something like this. But it's going to be really interesting to see, though, and this is where the other side of me comes into it, is what does that mean for the actual design of the multiplayer in terms of progression systems, in terms of what I guess free-to-play games would typically include. Does that mean that, they have come out and said there won't be loot boxes and things, but they will be forms of microtransactions. So the assumption is there's going to be Battle Pass, like your Fortnite, like your Rocket League, your Call of Duties, basically every game these days.
Yeah.
So I guess the original was probably Dota with that stuff, but that's it's almost a given at this point. I just hope that it does not affect progression in that sense. I've said last week that I'm a fan of when multiplayer games, that it doesn't matter if you played for 200 hours or you're playing your first game, you're on equal ground.
Yeah,
it should always, in my opinion, be, okay, it's cool to get ranks and stuff and things like that, but they don't affect the gameplay. I remember trying the Bioshock 2 multiplayer, and suddenly everyone that's playing the game and ranked up has got all these cool perks and abilities, and it's like, well, how is that fair? And it's the same with Assassin's Creed, which actually had I think with Brotherhood and a few of the other games that had the multiplayer. The multiplayer in those games are actually really cool, but you were at a huge disadvantage if you just started, because a lot of the best abilities you didn't get till later on, and you had to play a heap of the game to get them. So I really hope with it going free to play that it only sticks to cosmetics, and it doesn't get very predatory with its monetization.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few things there. So I think most people now feel that pay to win stuff, where you can buy your way to perks that give you an unfair advantage, that's becoming almost, not unacceptable, but just to a point where people just don't like that at all, and it really sours the whole experience.
Well, you can thank Battlefront 2 for that.
Well, yeah, and sometimes you need these extreme examples that wakes up everyone. And I think also that game helped push a lot of jurisdictions to really question loot boxes to a point where, you're actually seeing them phased out by the industry without regulation, because I think they see the writing on the wall and they don't want to be forced, right?
Yeah.
But, you've got the really big ones like FIFA, where they literally make like $1 billion of revenue a year on that game. It's just insane from the loot boxes and stuff like that.
NBA 2K with actual casinos in them. It's just mind-boggling. And
I do wish we were doing the potty back then, because that was like, an unbelievable moment. It was like a Trump-like moment in gaming, where it's like, really? Are they saying that? Like, is this a joke? Is this an elaborate joke or something? But yeah, just going to your point, like, so pay to win, I'm 100% on the same page as you. Like, if you can buy something that gives you, a better shield or something that you can't normally get, like, that's just BS. But, progression, I'm kind of a bit of two minds. I think, it sounds weird that I'm saying this because this game's kind of not built to be competitive, but one thing that Splatoon 2 really taught me, and Splatoon 1 really, is that, giving people different roles and feeling like they can participate is quite critical as well. So I think it's okay if you have a bit of nuance. If you've been playing for a while, maybe you have certain things that you can do, abilities, but it's this balancing act of how do you make it in such a way that it doesn't make it unfair for a newbie to come along. And, I've certainly felt this when I tried to get into Rainbow Six Siege, because I thought, this kind of game, I love those type of competitive multiplayer games. But just getting into it, and it's like everyone has got like maxed out packages, and you have to buy operators and all this kind of weird stuff. I was just like, it just kind of put me off the whole thing altogether. So yeah, I get where you're coming from. I'm probably not as extreme in terms of just really disliking a game completely if it has any of those elements.
Well, speaking about
But just going,
Splatoon, let's hope they don't bring across Splatoon's non-existent lobby model.
oh yeah, like yeah, and yeah, park that side
Oh
of it.
my
I
god,
think the
that is...
gameplay itself.
Oh my god. I can't... I only played that game for one night, and I just cannot believe what we had to go through just to play a match. That was insane.
So yeah, the context is Splatoon 2 went free on a weekend. I got Swinny because I love Splatoon 2. I love that game so much. And I would play it so much more if the online was better. But I love it so much and I tried to get you into it, and the fact that there's no real lobby system. You have to kind of join at the same time as someone else and then hope that you get in the same sequence of match with them. And then it's like they could be on your side one time, they could be against you the next round. It's so dumb. It's really like insane because it's actually worse than Xbox Live, the OG Xbox. They had a lobby system in Halo 2. So like it's quite amazing that that's not in it. And just like one thing I wanted to round out was, and a concept that I'll probably talk about a lot, is there's a concept around perceived versus actual value. And, I guess there's a bit of marketing as well, but you do want to maximize your perceived value over the actual value you're delivering as a company. Like, essentially, that's what all companies are trying to do. And this announcement was really smart because I saw it and I was like, wow, that's awesome. Like, what the hell? Like, they're going to go free for the multiplayer. Like, that's probably the first thing I'd want to play with Halo Infinite. But then, what you said at the start, I was like, hang on a second, wait. Like, if I was in the Xbox ecosystem, I probably already have Game Pass and you got to have Xbox Live. So this is kind of like a nothing announcement for me if I was in that situation. But the way it hits people, it does actually sound really crazy. So it's very smart marketing, I think, if for nothing else.
Definitely.
And also just confirms that the multiplayer is launching with the game. I do have some concerns about whether the game is going to launch in a coherent manner. Probably not as bad as Anthem, but 343's already had experience with rough launches. So I don't know, man. I'd get a bit nervous just from if you're a big Halo fan about this game personally.
Oh, look, I think I don't remember any specific issues around Halo 4 or 5. So I think with Master Chief Collection, they tried to bite off more they can chew in one go, because with Master Chief Collection, the original launch, I mean, it was there was everything at once, with the exception of ODST and Reach, which they brought out later. So on the PC, they've at least staggered the release, which I think has worked out better for them. So
yeah, for sure. So sticking with the Xbox ecosystem, Battletoads, we now know a release date, August 20th, right around the corner. Initial thought around this was just, I feel like we've heard very little about this game, and now it's coming out in a few weeks.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people forget that it exists, and it doesn't help that its first trailer, which was E3, I think it was probably 2 years ago at this point.
Yeah, that was my gut feel. It was about 2018, I reckon.
It wasn't a great trailer. Now, I won't say... So they've got a new launch trailer that it's probably the first time I've had a good look at it since then, because I'm not a huge Battletoads fan, honestly. But it was much better because they showed up a lot of, I guess, what they're calling the multi-genre gameplay, which makes sense. It's Battletoads, so there's obviously the racing kind of turbo tunnel style levels, and then they've got like what looks like shoot 'em up style levels like Gigaleak and things like that. It looks really cool. It's a follow up. It's the last game in the franchise was 1994, which is crazy. Like, essentially, Battletoads was only around for that 3 to 4 year period, and they put out a whole bunch of games across different platforms, and then it just kind of went away, which is strange to me because it is beloved by a lot of people. I think it is definitely an overrated game in many regards. It looks amazing. It can, there's so many things that should have hit the my buttons, so to speak, but it's just, I think it's horribly designed. It not even the turbo tunnel. I'm cool with the turbo tunnel. Maybe they could have made it slightly easier, but whatever. It's the levels afterwards that are just. It's just trial and error in pure form. And I remember there's one level where you're racing against like a rat down these things, and you need to know what you're doing, otherwise you just have no chance of winning. And that's horrible design. There's elements of that in, Mega Man when you're dropping through the layers and stuff, but that's very quick to learn and it's easy to repeat and get back into the game. Battletoads, if you lose there, you can essentially start back at the start of the game. And I nearly beat that game, but I had to use like rewind features and things with the rare replay to do that. And I'm just like, how would anyone ever play through this? Normally,
I like that claim. I nearly beat that game using rewind features.
Well, that's why I made sure to say it in the same sentence, because it's not really beating it, but I wanted to at least experience the game. And then you got awesome people out there like the Mexican runner, the speed runner, who's great at that game.
Oh yeah, that guy.
Like there's people that can do it, but they're people that obviously they're freaks of nature, basically.
Oh yeah.
But
there's some seriously frame perfect stuff that you need to do in Battletoads.
But when I watched the trailer,
frame perfect.
The other thing that really stood out to me is, I don't know if you remember the Dark Queen, who's like the big bad guy. So she had a incredibly overly sexualized design. It was kind of ridiculous. But there were elements of design like, okay, that's actually a cool design. I'm happy if they scale it back a little bit. But it's like they went completely opposite direction. It's really weird how they've chosen to redesign her. It's
like a nerd or something.
Yeah, it's almost like Steven Universe or some kind of, like Nicktoons kind of thing. And it's like, okay, but I think it's a bit much. Like, still, it kind of loses, I guess, the essence of, of what you're probably going... You're going to that game to relive a lot of nostalgia. And I think a decision like that is a bit questionable. But, yeah, I'm willing to give this a try. Any bet it's going to be better designed than the original games, simply because it's probably going to be more accessible. And I don't mind a hard game, but that game, the original, was ridiculous. It was just ridiculous.
Yeah, like I owned the original game on the NES, and I don't know why I owned it or I had that specific game. Maybe it was just like, back in those days, it was you going off very limited information, and sometimes it's just the cover or some magazine spoke about it and it looked cool. That game, for whatever you want to rate it, like 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5, or whatever it is the most well-known 2 out of 5 game that existed on the NES. Like, it's not a good game. Battletoads on the NES, sorry to break it to people, it's not a good game. Like, I totally agree with everything you say. It's not well designed. It's not fair in its toughness. It's not earned in its toughness. And it was a bit symptomatic of that era around, having really, really hard games. Fine. But it was to a point where it was like ridiculous. And it just wasn't really fun. But very popular franchise. And I'm really surprised they haven't revived it earlier. Because it's probably one of the few franchises that people, they know it. Like, if you go, hey, there's a new Battletoads game, they actually know what that is.
Yeah.
So
I'm still surprised that Rare never took a stab at it on the N64, because that kind of would have felt natural to, and maybe there was something that, maybe there's some hidden archive thing out there that, has come out in the past that I don't know about, that, hey, they were, planning on doing something like that. But it makes, to me, it would have made sense. Hopefully, again, like, it would have been a better game. Like, you've always got to have... Battletoads is always probably going to be a hard game, but I think you can approach it from a much better direction. So,
Well, I think one thing about Rare and what was happening in the N64 era and the early GameCube era was Nintendo... I think they realized that they needed to stop them making their own IPs because it was becoming a risk. So they actually started to force them to change their games into Nintendo IP games.
Yeah.
So, for instance, like Star Fox Adventure, that was going to be like Dino Planet or whatever it was going to be called.
Yeah.
Dinosaur Planet, yeah. And there's lots of instances of that for N64 as well, that they're like, no, don't make this, make it a Donkey Kong game, or make it like something like that, in the Nintendo IP wheelhouse, which is smart, like, to be honest. when you're working with the second parties. But yeah, look, like I think this game, you know, you give it a chance. It's going to be on Game Pass, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those weird ones where I feel like if the gameplay is tight and fair, it actually could be an awesome game. Because the Battletoads, as an idea, it's super cool. It's just like, you know, a totally rad version of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's a total rip-off of that. So, like, from that perspective, it's fine. So I could see a cool game coming out of it. But yeah, the original I don't like. But it's very, very famous. Very, very famous. And I still feel like people don't think of it. Like, I almost think if you made a very faithful follow-up of that game, people would hate it because they probably don't realize how bad that game was.
Yeah, it's that game. It looked great. It had so many things in its favor, but if you just tried to play it, it was miserable.
And now I'm not sure how you'd even segue to the next topic that
Talking
we
about
have.
miserable. No, not really. So Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis. So that was unveiled in the Xbox Game Showcase that we talked about last week, and we did go over it briefly, but now we actually know what it actually is. So Sega put it out there, and we finally, you know, it's kind of like it got an explanation, but it's for people, I guess, that are into PSO2. It's probably still got a heap of questions because the whole thing about it is that we thought, okay, they're essentially going to Realm Reborn the title, even though PSO2 is incredibly popular, has been since it came out in Japan originally. They're going to overhaul it graphically and in a lot of ways. And they're kind of doing that, but it sounds like it's going to run simultaneously alongside normal PSO2 as two separate things.
Yeah. Two separate universes, right?
Yeah, and because PSO2, I've only played probably PSO2 for about 5 hours or so definitely haven't experienced everything that game has to offer. But in terms of like when you go out to the missions, like they're definitely kind of narrow corridor things with smaller open areas where you're obviously doing your missions and things. Nothing like what we saw in this trailer. So everyone's like, what is going on? So yeah, essentially this New Genesis is what they're calling an open field online RPG. The graphics engine, as we know, and the game systems are completely overhauled. But what's interesting is PSO2 is also getting the overhauled graphics. So it's like, okay, so they're trying to appeal to, I guess, people that like the current form of it, as well as appealing to new people potentially. But they'll coexist, and you can bring your character across, but it doesn't include character growth or your level, experience points, skills, or anything like that. So basically, you can bring your character across and how they look, and probably some other things that, you know, are very specific to, you know, probably your account. But it's essentially a new character, and I think some people probably enjoy that. It's a chance to, you know, like, you're not coming across as super powered and in endgame gear and everything. You're just you're the same person, but you're starting from scratch in this new, I guess, version of the game. And yeah, it's just really interesting.
Is it a new version of the game? Is that what it is?
Well,
I don't know.
It's a new stream of the game.
I just feel like if I was making an honest trailer of this, it'd be something like from the country that brought you Kingdom Hearts.
Oh god.
It's just like, what is this? This is like, you know, you're in marketing, right? Without giving too much away, you're in marketing in that space. How would you market this? Like, what? It's like, I you know, I read about this stuff more than I ever had before, obviously, because we're doing this, and it's just like, I'm trying to wrap my head about what is this?
The thing is, they don't.
It's like two games where they're different universes, but they're kind of like shared and like mirrored or twin, or it's so weird.
The thing though, it's PSO2. I don't think they have to try that hard because Phantasy Star Online has a very loyal fan base, and
sure. But why are they doing this? What's the purpose?
I think they're just, well, you got to think PSO2 as it is at the moment, other than obviously the console ports, is an 8-year-old game that they've been expanding upon. So this is before they probably even planned on bringing this to Xbox, and I'm guessing it's going to be on, you know, the platforms and stuff. But I guess they're creating a new experience, but they don't want to go to the point of saying this is PSO3. This is just like a side story kind of thing. So it's something else that people can play, and the key point, something else people can spend money on.
But I don't understand because it's still called Phantasy Star Online 2. It's just got the subtitle difference, right?
Yeah, but if you look at the history of Phantasy Star Online, it's the same kind of stuff. So they did Phantasy Star Online, Episode 1, Episode 2. Episode 3 was a card battler. You know, they've done different stuff like this in the past. And they even had Phantasy Star Universe, which was on PS3 and Xbox 360. I actually completed that game.
Okay.
I completed an MMO that's not really an MMO. Like, you know, it's just weird, the history of Phantasy Star Online specifically.
Yeah.
I just wish that at some point they'll actually make another Phantasy Star game, like a single player. That'd be really cool. But hey,
yeah, well, that's where it originally came from, right? On the Master System.
Yeah, so I've played through, I think it's Phantasy Star Online 2, and I think that series it's kind of what, I guess, Star Ocean is to modern day. You know, anything that's like a sci-fi JRPG is kind of cool to me. But
and then also to confuse the message a little bit more, Phantasy Star Online 2, like, what do you call that? Do you just call it Phantasy Star Online 2, and the fact that you don't say New Genesis infers that you're talking about the one that was released in 2000? I feel like you need to put brackets. You know how now people say Doom 2016? You need to say Phantasy Star Online 2 2012.
Well, they are referring to themselves as PSO2 and PSO2 NGS. So when you're talking about online, that's how people just refer to them. So.
Okay. Yeah, and just to convolute the message a little bit further, PSO2 is coming out to Steam in the next couple of days on August 5th, right?
Yeah, so it's been available through like their own launches and things, I believe, in the Japanese market and potentially other markets as well. So now it's actually just come to Steam, which I think that's going to see a huge boost for the community. And I don't know if there's crossplay between Xbox and PC players right now, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's potentially going to be part of it. If not now, then soon enough. Which, with that kind of game, is only going to add to the community. So, I guess following on from that one, last week we also talked about spiritual successor to Suikoden, which is Eiyuden Chronicles. So they had a Kickstarter. They announced a Kickstarter last week, and it hit its goal in 2 hours. So this is pretty crazy. I think at the time when I actually checked the amount, I think they had reached 1.5 million within 1 day, which is pretty crazy. Now, Suikoden is not the biggest known series, and it's a Konami franchise, and we'll talk a little bit about Konami later. But that means it hit its stretch goals for the console releases. So originally it was only going to be on PC until they, I guess, hit those stretch goals. So apparently now, you know, assuming that it does get actually produced, you never know with Kickstarter, but it'll be coming to Xbox One, PS4, Xbox Series X, PS5, and I guess whatever Nintendo console is the most relevant at the time, whether it's Switch or the next one. I kind of doubt at this point that it will actually come to Xbox One and PS4, just looking at the timeline and stuff. But hey, maybe it's further along than what we know. But they've been pretty upfront, similar to, you know, other Kickstarters where this is more, I guess, for them to then prove to investors that they've got you know, what they need to sell this game and produce. And this is almost just for, I guess, the added extras that they want to add to it. So yeah.
Yeah, because the Kickstarter, the goals, that's not enough, even for a game as scaled down as this. So, you know, what do you call it these days? It's almost like a 2.5D RPG, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's not really a term for this, but I feel like in 5 years' time there probably will, because I feel like more games like this will come out.
But I mean, there's been games like this coming out since the PlayStation era, so it's not a new thing. But they've just obviously had a spurt of popularity with Octopath and things like that. So.
Yeah, but it's not like the budget's certainly not enough to actually make a game like this. But yeah, to be fair, like you said, they're calling it out and sort of saying, yep, Like they want to demonstrate that people are interested in this, and I certainly think the amount of money that they raised, they've kind of proved that pretty quickly. And it still blows my mind how much this looks like Octopath Traveler. Like I feel like if you just take the images, it's just so crazy. It's like a carbon copy almost.
Yeah, the good thing though is that it will actually be a very different style of JRPG.
Yeah.
Because just knowing what I know about Octopath, I still have yet to actually play that game, but just knowing that the way that the progression works and I guess how the narrative weaves in with the different characters you choose from the beginning, it sounds like very different than what Suikoden has done in the past. I could be wrong. Again, maybe there's a Suikoden game that plays exactly like Octopath. I don't know about, but but it does look very similar. But hey, it's last week, bring it on. And more games that
and it
look
looks
like
awesome.
this.
It looks awesome.
Better.
Yeah, I agree. I like the aesthetic and it looks awesome. And, it's good that games like Bloodstained have done well. And I think it's starting to prove that those kind of games people want to play, and hint to that studio behind a lot of those IP that people are desperate to come out. And I know that you're going to cover that a little bit later.
Yes.
Now on to what could actually legitimately be the biggest game of the year. And no, I'm not talking about other games that just released in the last few days or Last of Us Part 2, but Animal Crossing.
Oh, you mean Corona
Animal
Crossing?
Corona Crossing. I think, based on the numbers, they're already saying that Animal Crossing is almost selling as much as Last of Us Part 2, but Last of Us Part 2 is including digital and physical sales, whereas Animal Crossing is only including the physical sales. So I'm like, wow, this game is like so much bigger than we even realize. So there's a new update, so a summer update, which is highly offensive to us in Australia, given that it's winter, and it's a winter update for us.
You know that? Oh,
So-
let me say something about that.
Yeah,
It frustrates me to no end when websites and like a lot of outlets say, "Oh, summer 2020."
Yeah.
And they-
Or fall, which is even worse.
Yeah, and they do not clarify anything else. And I'm like, okay, now I have to go and look up exactly when summer is and make sure, like, okay, does that line up with my understanding?
What do you mean?
Like, because I don't
What are
get
you
it to
talking
memory
about?
when freaking summer is in the US so I can bring it up whenever I need it. Like, I have to actually remember that stuff. I have to look it up.
What?
I'm like, I don't know when summer is. I couldn't tell you now. Is it reverse of ours? Is it when it's winter here, it's summer there?
What? Oh my god. What are you talking
No,
about?
the exact months. I'm
Yes,
talking
of
about
course.
the month period.
Of course it's the opposite. Of course it's
Is
the
it the
opposite
exact
of us.
opposite,
What are you
though?
talking
Like
about?
the 3-month period
Yes.
of us, our winter is exact 3
Wow,
months there?
okay.
That's what I'm talking about.
So I'll give you credit a little bit that in the US, in a lot of places in the US, they count summer and winter a little bit differently than the way we count it. We count it as the 1st of December is summer, and it's 3 months. In the US, it actually can be, I think, from the middle of, so if you're thinking about it, so then it's like 6 months difference, they can actually count it from, I think, the middle of June, or like even the month before the middle of
Exactly,
June,
and-
depending on where you
that's
are.
what I'm
But
talking
generally, it is just 6 months. No. Generally, it's just the opposite
Okay,
of us.
because that's what
That's why I was laughing.
That's what I'm talking about is the exact like month periods. Because when someone says, "Oh, it's due in summer 2020," I'm like, okay, well, what month?
Yeah, that's
potential
winter.
months?
That's now
What
for us.
potential months is that? Like, that's what I hate. Is that
Sure.
it's like I know that obviously you got websites that you look at if they looked at their analytics and stuff, like the vast majority of people readers are American, right? I'm not saying that's not the case.
Oh, yeah. Or European.
But that's the thing, it's like European as well. Like, at least do something for that.
It's the same season.
Okay. Anyway.
What are you talking about? Do you not know that Europe has the same seasons as the US?
Oh, what? But they're in different part of the freaking world, so how does that work? I don't know.
What are you talking about? Seasons are based on hemispheres. North and South hemispheres.
Anyway.
You should play Animal Crossing, because in Animal Crossing you can play either the Northern Hemisphere or the Southern Hemisphere. And then you can learn about how the hemispheres work.
No, but
in
that's the
seasons.
thing is, right, that's what I'm talking about is that I think that stuff needs to be more inclusive for all readers.
Oh, yeah,
for
I
all
agree.
readers. That's what I'm talking about.
It annoys me to no end when I read something and it says fall of 2020. We don't use the word fall in Australia, so I need to then count it out in my mind what the word fall means and then convert it into Australia.
You know what pissed me off the most is when was it Bethesda was putting out Dishonored, and the word Dishonored is spelt with a U over here, right? Or honor,
Yeah.
dishonor. I'm like, okay, fair enough. They don't want to entitle the game that, but I remember just like driving to uni or something like that, and having to see like stay behind a bus for like 40 minutes that had the sign Dishonored. I'm like, spell it like, oh, we spell it when you're advertising to us. It's frustrating.
All I can say is I want to take you to a party. You sound like a lot of fun.
Oh, come on.
How do you explain the Labour Party, the Australian Labour Party then?
All right, let's move on.
So yeah, getting back to this update for the biggest game of the year. And you know what? Can I just, this is also going to tie into a segment we're going to talk about later. Game of the year. Is this game at all going to be in any consideration of game of the year? Animal Crossing. I mean, it's so beloved, but I feel like it's going to be so ignored in that space.
It depends on the outlet, really. I mean, the thing is, I don't consider Animal Crossing to be much of a game, so I don't think it probably deserves to be on Game of the Year lists. My opinion.
That's ridiculous. Of course it's a game. Anyway, so in terms of this update, so it's coming, it's actually live now by the time we've published this. So there's Dream Suite, so that was in prior games as well. It allows people to visit like a dream version of the player's island, where you can actually make changes to your island. There's also a firework feature, and then some further features around the camera mode. But probably the biggest announcement and inclusion in this update is finally, you can actually back up a version of your island to the cloud. Now, why is this critical? Something like my wife, I think she's put like 350 hours into Animal Crossing. So if her Switch malfunctioned and they couldn't repair it, she's just lost her island completely. She'd be devastated, to be honest. And this is not a simple way they're going to do it. There's a couple of things we should point out here really quickly. You have to back it up, and you have to manually back up the save data. So you should be doing this periodically. And then also, to be able to recover it at the moment, you need to contact your local Nintendo support. So in Australia, you have to reach out to Nintendo Australia, and then there's like a flow chart that you have to follow, like whether you've actually sent it in to Nintendo or you haven't, or where your consoles are. And people aren't really sure what happens if you try to trick them, I guess, because the only reasons why they'll allow you to do this is if your Switch is damaged and not working, or it's been stolen or misplaced. So there's some people who are speculating that if you do this, they might brick the online functionality of your old Switch, which Nintendo has done that in the past, by the way. So like, yeah, it's super clunky, Super Nintendo. And they've also said that, yes, they will eventually, and I believe this year, introduce a feature where you can do this yourself, like through the normal Nintendo Switch Online cloud backup. So that is in the works, but that I think is probably going to be much later in the year, maybe November, December.
I'm shaking my head at this because why would you not just get those two things ready at once and just roll them out at the same time? Like your ability to transfer as well as your ability to, I guess, save.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a very Nintendo thing, right? Where they're just bare minimalists with these kind of things, like they strip everything back that they don't think is around the gameplay experience. Like it's going back to the point that we made around Splatoon 2, right? Like it's crazy how non-functional the lobby system is, but that's the version of the game that people play all the time. And they kind of get away with it. Even Smash Brothers is not great, and it's a lot better than it ever was before in terms of how you play it online and everything like that. Like the fact that I can't have like a mate at my house and we're playing on the same system and join an arena online in Smash Brothers is just crazy to me. It seems like no reason why you can't, but yeah, they don't allow it. So yeah, but this is a huge update. I know my wife's really happy about it, and she's literally like time traveling and trying to get back to every single day so she doesn't miss out on anything in this game. So, and it feels like they're gonna have like a shed load of updates, and I'd imagine they'll probably eventually have paid DLC in this game, just because there's just so many units out there. It's just a gold mine for them. And are you gonna be playing the game?
Look, I what I said before sounded harsh, but I got to provide a bit of context. So I had the original Animal Crossing, or at least the original one for us on the GameCube, and I had fun with it. But I had more fun playing the NES games that you could unlock in that game than I did actually doing the main stuff, because I know that game was very bare bones compared to what Animal Crossing is these days. But I would much rather play something like Stardew Valley, where it just feels like there's more game to it. There's more, I guess there's more structure to it. And like a game like My Time at Portia is an example of that as well. And obviously Harvest Moon, I loved Harvest Moon on the SNES and the 64 version, things like that. But
yeah,
I know people love Animal Crossing. There are so many games out there, and I just like more structure from my games. So when I jokingly said, I don't think it's much of a game, it's because I actually view it more of, I guess, like a social app or experience, as opposed to a video game in my head, which I know is ridiculous. It's a video game, but I just don't. When I classify things, it's something different. Just like, there's a lot of weird games like, was it that Dreamcast game Seaman or something like that, like these games that are just kind of, they're different. They're almost, I should say, it's probably like software as opposed to, what I said about an app. It's like a piece of software that you interact with as opposed to a video game. So.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's very distinct. It's certainly a game, but it's very distinct. Moving into business news, so like for me, really actually interesting news. 2K and the NFL have actually signed an agreement, and what they're actually going to do is start making non-sim NFL games. So they're allowed to use the player names, likeness, the actual player teams. And there's a game that's coming out in 2021, but the catch is they can't make simulation style games. So games that would compete with Madden. But this is actually really good news, because Madden has kind of had its space. I think it's for like at least 10 years, maybe even 15 years. There hasn't been a competitor in that space to Madden. And, back in the day with, the Madden games that we played and the more arcade style NFL games, like that's something that I could see myself playing. Whereas the real simulation ones, I don't know, to be perfectly honest, I feel like they're a little bit boring.
I know a lot of people love NFL Blitz games, so hopefully that, I'm definitely not an NFL fan, but I loved Madden, I think it was Madden 94 on SNES, or 93.
Yeah.
Like, I played that game heaps, and then when I realised half the time I can just like put the controller down and it'll do it for me, it kind of lost a bit of its fun. But it was... I think, like, it's good to have alternative options, even if it means that, it's a different experience. It's kind of like, I guess, also with NHL games, there was like 3-on-3 arcade hockey game on 360, which is really fun. Very different, obviously, than, like proper NHL sim games. But it gives people options.
Yeah, and I actually think that the arcade style, like Mario Strikers style game, I think that's really underserved at the moment. And I feel like, if people actually serve that market well, it would be pretty big. And I think using like real teams, real players is one of the key things that you need to do. I certainly don't think you should do it the way that 2K has done it historically with things like NBA Playgrounds. And I'm assuming that that's what they're going to do with this. They're going to try to make this some kind of loot box, perk thing where you have to buy players. And, if you want, Joe Montana, you have to pay heaps of money, or Bo Jackson or something like that, which is going to be so annoying if they do that. But the one thing I wanted to call out, if you do want to play those older games, what you can do is there are actual ROM hacks where they patch in all the current day players and teams and team names and colors into the old games, like Super Tecmo Bowl or like NFL Madden 94. So you can actually play like the current team roster, but in the old game from the SNES or the NES, which I just think is super cool.
So if you play as Colin Kaepernick, can you take the knee in the old games?
Like I'm a 49ers fan, and I remember actually watching it live when he did that the first time. And I was like watching it just going, man, this is going to be massive. And it actually took so many years to all bubble up. And it is amazing now when you see that. And, when the basketball season just resumed the other day, you actually had the officials and the referees taking a knee. So yes, I don't think they've patched that quite in yet, but
except that one dude. I saw that one dude.
Oh really? I didn't know about
NBA player that's just standing and he's not wearing the Black Lives Matter. I'm like, man,
oh really?
Yeah, like
okay, I'm gonna go back and watch that.
You're kind of digging yourself in a grave there. Anyway, look that one up.
Look, like, and this is going off a way tangent. I'm a huge believer in doing what you think is right. So if you don't feel like you want to do that's your prerogative, and I don't think that means you are the opposite of what that kind of person is either.
Read the room, dude. Read the room.
No, I get what you're saying, but I don't think you should then cast him as someone who hates, African Americans or something like that. That's crazy.
He is African American.
Oh, okay, interesting. I got to go back and watch and see what player it is because I love the NBA. I just didn't catch who someone did that. So,
okay.
In further business news, we had Microsoft. So every quarter in the US, public companies need to do filings, so 10K filings with the SEC. It is always interesting because these large companies, they have to really be quite obvious and honest with their numbers, and it's not really a lot of spin that they're allowed to put in it. And just what I wanted to call out is, yes, they have had a lot of increase. So it's like 11% increase in the digital content. So these are things like Xbox Live, Game Pass, but 11% year on year, given how big the numbers have been with coronavirus, is probably realistically flat compared to what you'd expect the numbers to be. And then you actually saw their whole division. So this is everyone under Phil Spencer. It only went up by 2%. So, if you're kind of doing the maths and you go, well, wait a second, the Xbox content and services has gone up 11%. Their hardware numbers have just plummeted. Now, I get it's like, the final year, but anecdotally, you just hear from people in retail, along with the news that we had last week around the Series X stopping production, that essentially those Series X, especially in America, they're just not selling and they're still in stores. And now with, the next console coming out, they might not be bought up, those consoles, or like they might just go on deep discount. So yeah, it's just like Microsoft's in a really tough spot at the moment. And, more than PlayStation, I feel like it's just so critical for them to land the launch of the Xbox Series X. And one thing I wanted to ask you and just bring it up in this topic, we didn't go through this last time, but are you planning to get it at launch, the Series X?
So I mentioned that it will really depend on what games are, I guess, out in that initial launch period. So we know, obviously, a lot of the ones. None of those are going to make me buy it immediately. But if it turns out that, let's say they announce something like a Mass Effect Remastered trilogy and it's going to be on the new console, then maybe, that's an example of something that might get me there. Of course, you got big titles I'm really looking forward to, like Elden Ring. That's not going to be out anywhere near launch. So it's interesting. I've got an Xbox One X. I'm very happy with how that's serving me at the moment for whatever I need it to do. And I've got a pretty beefy PC to play any games that, that kind of, I guess that I'm not going to be able to play on the Xbox One X. So I feel like I'm in a good position at the moment, but hey, you never know. It could turn out that, I just take the plunge anyway. But I think there would have to be some serious killer titles for me to make that move straight away.
And it's interesting because you mean exclusive titles, right?
Not so much. So when I say
okay,
well, that's the thing. So
I mean exclusive on next gen. I'll frame it like that. So exclusive to PS5 and Xbox Series X, not also released on Xbox One. Or what are your thoughts on that?
No, so I'm weird because depending on the games they asked, I will want to play both versions. So
Yeah, which you did with Breath of the Wild, and you hated both versions.
God,
Amazingly.
hate is
Let's get
hate is
into
the
that
wrong
some
word.
other
Hate
time.
is the wrong word.
We could spend hours on that.
No, but I will generally. I'm achievement whore.
Yes, you are.
I'm in it for the Chiefs.
We'll speak about this very shortly as well. But yeah, go on.
So I will usually, depending on how they handle that stuff, if they're separate lists, and I'll actually want to play it on both. So it's just, it is what it is. I can't say it's not. So
Okay. I gotta jump in because this achievement thing hasn't come up so far, and it will just keep coming up. I'm guaranteeing you. But you are so crazy on achievements. It actually drove me, as one of your closer friends, to spend 5 hours in a Hong Kong video game arcade where it's like multiple levels, chatting to every single merchant there and digging through Xbox 360 games. Xbox 360. This is not that long ago. This was like last year, right? And talking to people who don't speak English and speak Cantonese, and I only know a little bit of Cantonese. And it wasn't until the very last merchant that I actually found this weird, obscure game. And the whole reason why, it's not that you don't have this game. How many copies of this game that I'm talking about do you have?
I own 2 other versions of this game.
You have 2 versions. What's the game called again?
It's called. Oh God. Oh man,
Can you even remember the name?
You put me on the spot. Oh my God, what is the game? I can't.
Oh my God.
Remember.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, I can't. Wait, let me.
This makes me laugh so hard
because I'm gonna find the game.
You were so like, I knew how much it meant to you. That's the only reason why I did it.
It's
I knew that it was
a
like
From Software game, so I'll just look up Dark Souls and I'll go from there.
So I'll give the listeners the context. No, like, you have so many achievements. Like, from an Australian perspective, you're like number 1 or in the top list around RPG achievements for Xbox.
Yeah.
And like, I knew that you needed this game because crazy achievement people like you, what they do is they play the same game, and sometimes I've seen they play it simultaneously, the same game on multiple consoles.
Yeah, I do that
so
as
that
well.
from different regions. Oh, okay, there you go. You are one of those even more insane people. On multiple consoles, so that they can get more achievement score from the same game. So this weird game came out in, I think it's Hong Kong, Singapore, and maybe Taiwan region. It was a very small region, and you just can't order it. It doesn't exist anywhere, really. And it seemed to be going for like $100, $200 because it's so hard to get.
The reason I was put on the spot, but also because it's got 2 names. So it's Enchanted Arms, and
The Enchanted
and
Arms,
it's
that's
also
it,
called
yeah.
EM Enchant Arm as well.
Yes.
So
Now,
yeah, and it's made by From Software, so who make Dark Souls.
it's even better that you didn't remember the name,
Uh,
because I spent 5 hours in this arcade trying to find this game for you. And then when I actually found...
I was just saying, any other
When I
day
found-
I would have been fine, but like I wasn't expecting it to come up, and you threw me.
So I found this game, and I was like, wow, I found this game. It probably, like, I reckon if you sold it on eBay and you listed it for like $200, I think someone would buy it eventually. Because people like you, it's just like, oh my God, I need this. This is like the last game to get to knock this thing off. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
so,
I
like-
would have bought it for 200 easily. So
Yeah, you even said that. I think you said you're happy to go up to $250 Australian, right? So that's about $180 US. You were happy to spend, right? And I was there, and I love negotiating. And so I was going through, and I finally found it, and I was trying not to react. I was like, oh yeah, whatever. And then I'm like, oh. And I asked the vendor, I was like, oh, these are all crap games. Like, you know, how much are these? These are all just like rubbish here. And they were like, oh, you know, it's like 30 Hong Kong dollars or something, which is like 5 Australian dollars. And I'm like, oh, really? I wasn't even happy with that. I'm like, oh yeah, all right, yeah, I'll get this game. You know, it's got a good cover. I don't know, it looks crap though. So, because I did not want them to cotton on that I was like super into, like, oh my God, I can't believe. And the fact that it was like the last vendor, it was amazing. I wish I had like a video about it. It was like so crazy because it went through all the levels. I got to the top level, and then I finally found it. I was like, wow, that's so crazy. So,
and when I asked you, I'm like, this is a ridiculous request, but hey, I'll just throw it out there. And man, you delivered. You delivered in spades.
No, and I know how much it means to you and how much you kind of invest in this hobby, so that's all fine. And I think that's a good birthday present or whatever I gave it to you as.
The
But
best part is you can't even complete the game. All the achievements in it.
that's true. I remember you telling me
It's
that you can't even get like 1,000 points from it or
out of the
whatever
three
because it's
versions
broken.
of the game, it's the only one that has glitched achievements. So
That's awesome. That's so great. And then, yeah, just talking about achievements. So the Epic Game Store is adding achievements and mod support into the Epic Game Store, which is really, really cool. I think there's a few games that are testing it out. Mech Warrior 5 is going to have mod support as the first game that's going to have mod support. Look, like one thing for me as a huge Rocket League fan, I actually use Rocket League mods when I play Rocket League. That's how into it I am. And there's like trainer packs and all this kind of cool stuff that you can do. And the fact that they have this now means like this is probably the number one thing that people were arguing about around the Epic Game Store because it didn't support this previously. And you know what's going to happen with Steam and the workshop and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think this is really cool news.
yeah, I mean, any extra features in a platform that a lot of people now have and will continue to grow, its user base is going to be great. I mean, it's been known for a while that they were planning on adding at least the achievements. I'm not sure about the mod support because they've had their roadmap, their Trello board or whatever it is, visible for a while. The only thing about achievements on PC platforms is outside of, I guess, probably the Windows Store where it's very controlled with obviously the Xbox ecosystem. Steam achievements are just an absolute mess. Anyone that hunts for Steam achievements knows that there's games out there that get put up on the marketplace specifically so people can unlock the achievements. They're just made for that purpose. And so the whole point is they will at least get some sales from those people that are looking to just artificially inflate their score. And you've seen that happening in the Xbox One ecosystem as well. There's a lot of cheap games coming out that are super easy. You can complete all 1,000 achievements within 1 hour or so. And
Whoa, really?
yeah, there's hundreds of those games now. So what used to be something that had, when I say had a bit of merit to it, like you could like compare it to something. Okay, that person's got 2,000, that person's got 5,000. Now that stuff doesn't really mean much at all, and I think people focus on different things. Like I focus on game completions and within certain genres. Other people focus on completion percentage. How many of the games have I actually completed all the achievements for? So I think it just and that's my worry to go back to the whole PC space. So Steam achievements is that I think it's great, but I just hope they control it way better than Steam has.
Yeah, knowing Epic, they won't because they don't try to edit stuff. And I think that's one thing about PC that it's a much more freer and open ecosystem. And it's been really funny the whole achievement thing because we've probably flipped positions a bit and then gone back and forth on achievements. Look, ultimately, I think achievements, it's a nice to have if you can add it in and make it optional. So I really like the features where you can turn off the notifications and all that kind of stuff. I don't think it's essential, but at the same time, I'd love if Nintendo added some kind of achievement system into the Switch. But I still feel like overall, you really need to have almost editorial control over the achievements. And there's just too many games that the way they set their achievements up, and same as trophies, and you're right, it's way worse on PC. Like I've got a bunch of Steam games and they're ridiculous, the achievements. Like I was going through, it's basically like you get achievements for buying DLC. It's just nuts, right? Yeah. I think there is an opportunity. Probably Nintendo is probably the only one that could do it. Is they actually have a bit of editorial control over how you put the achievements together, what they're worth. What's the expected time for people to get them? Because some of them are just like ridiculous, and I just go, you can get it all in an hour. It's like kind of meaningless at that point. Whereas I really like, the whole thing about 100%ing a game and, is it a notable game and what is that game like? So,
and talking about ridiculous achievements, Skater XL, which is a skating game that came out, I believe, a few days ago, at least in, I don't know if it's in preview form or if it's in full release at the moment, but it's a skate sim game along the lines of Skate and Session as well. Has an achievement that apparently will take roughly 2,700 hours to unlock if you do it legitimately. And what that achievement is traveling the what have they said is the circumference of the Earth on a skateboard.
Yeah, 40,000 kilometers.
Yeah,
right?
well, that's what the article said. I haven't fact checked that one, but it doesn't matter. That is ridiculous. Like I've played games with ridiculous achievements before, and there's also the infamous was a Bomberman. What's that? Act Zero, that like horrible attempt at a realistic Bomberman, where they on 360 where you had to plant 1 million bombs and blow up 1 million blocks, and when people did the calculations for that, it's like this is gonna take like months of work to do this. This is not that far off, but what's pretty funny is people have already started, because it's also I believe a trophy on the PlayStation version, is they're attempting to glitch through the world and then actually get it set up so you can actually get the kilometers tracked that way, so you can keep falling infinitely. And
that's mad.
And what's funny about that is I did that exact thing in Mafia 2. So in Mafia 2, in one of the DLCs, there was a achievement for driving a ridiculous amount of kilometers that would just take so long to do. But you could go up and like launch yourself into a certain building and fall through the world in your car, and you'll just keep falling. And eventually, you have to leave your like console for like 10 hours or something, and then like you get it. So it's just ridiculous. Like, why developers did they not even think about it? You know, like how is any sane person ever gonna get that? It's crazy.
So, like, just to call out something. So, this game has been in early access on PC for a while now. So, about 1.5 years, and it's just moved out of early access and been released on consoles and on PC in full form, I guess, quote unquote, in the last couple of days. And it's coming to the Switch as well. And it does actually seem like a really good skate game. Like, a lot of people are sort of saying maybe it's the best skate game out there. But yeah, this achievement sucks. Like, I hate stuff like this. This is kind of why, in general, I don't like achievements. It's like, to be able to do this, and I think they said the optimized way to do it now when you do that rubber banding stuff is like still over 1,000 hours. It's just like, no. Like, you know, the way I always remember these things, so in a work year at a normal, like, Australian workplace, there's 2,000 hours in a year in work years, right? Like, in work hours, right? So it's like saying half a year of work to get this achievement. That's stupid. That's, like, I guess, I know it's trolly and funny, but, you know, people like you treat these achievements seriously. It's kind of a bit of a piss take, right?
Well, when I say seriously, I mean, there's a strive to... When you play a game, I don't get achievements in every game, by the way. I focus mine, but the whole point is if I want to get all achievements in the game, yeah, I will. Like, it is really frustrating if developers have not just taken realistic expectations into account. To me, like, it's okay for, you know, a game requires multiple playthroughs or something like that, but essentially, if you can't get something within, I guess, the reasonable amount of time that a person would normally play a game, it's not a good achievement, you know, to require people to grind and do things that... Funny things, yeah, but not like hunt down 300 pigeons across Grand Theft Auto 4's world or something like that, you know.
That pissed you off so much, that one.
Oh.
I always remember that.
But it's, yeah, like, this is obviously not the first game to do this, but it's just stood out to me. I'm like, how are we still doing this? Have we not learned our lesson from the early days of Rare's horrible achievements in their games like Perfect Dark and things like that? So.
I actually like looking at this game a lot more. It's so funny. And again, this is why they do it, because then it becomes news and then people check it out. And like me, I've looked at it and I'm like, you know, maybe I'll play this game if it's on Game Pass or something like that. So like, it is smart, right? and it is annoying. Like, I don't like it. I don't like when people do this kind of stuff. Same as the gear. I don't know if you mentioned it. The Gears of War achievement, where it was like online, you had to get 1,000 kills or something like that. It was like so hard to get.
Yeah, I think it was.
I just remember looking
I think
at
10,000, but that.
Yeah,
Trust me,
10,000.
like in the achievement space, that's small potatoes these days. Like
Oh, really?
yeah, it's still frustrating. Don't get me wrong, but like that's when you got games like that are so popular. There's optimized ways to do that stuff that it makes it a lot easier. Like it's all about optimization. You know, you've got to like, especially if you're going to spend, and I thank God don't do this anymore. But like, if you're going to spend hours and hours in lobbies with people boosting crap, you know, you figure out the best ways to do this stuff.
So, okay, I feel like we do need to have a special feature, like a deep dive into your insanity with achievements. Because I think you
talk about the boosting diaries or something like that.
Yeah,
I've got lots of stories there that probably aren't interesting to anybody but me. But yeah.
Well, I do find them interesting, and I think you might have even lost people when you said boosting. So, like, what's boosting quickly?
Well, it's that dodgy thing that people do in multiplayer matches where they just, like, you know, they cheat and they, like, do... Basically, if you want to, like, level up quickly in Battlefield 3, you figure out, oh, this person can stand here and I keep refilling his ammo while he shoots his gun and suddenly I can level up quick and things like that. The thing is, boosting is horrible in games that have actual online communities and are still active. But boosting in games that are completely dead that no one plays is whatever, you know. So it's
Yeah, look, I think if you're not impacting anyone else, it's totally fine.
And that's the whole point. Yeah, is that like
yeah. When it's like throwing everyone's game off, and it's like, why is it like? To be fair, like I do this with Rocket League. In Rocket League, you know, the Battle Pass equivalent, Rocket Pass. There's ones where it's like, say something in the game, like say you know, my save or whatever it is, right? And I'll just say it at the start of the game. And I think sometimes the teammates are like, what are you talking about? Like, why are you saying this before the game's even started? But I just want to make sure that I've like ticked that box. Yeah. So then it progresses my pass. But it's kind of friggin' annoying. And just moving from games to board games. Contra. Contra's getting a board game. Games to games. Games to tabletop games.
Yeah.
So anyway, Contra, a board game. What is this board game about? It's not Monopoly. It's not Monopoly.
Oh man, imagine a Contra Monopoly. That'd be awesome.
Well, I much prefer this. It's an actual... It seems like they've, designed a game from the ground up, or is it based on a certain game?
I couldn't see it was based on anything, although it's probably very similar to many other games out there. But it's a 1 to 4 player board game, and it's based on the arcade NES original Contra, although it looks like there's some characters that, weren't in that have added, because essentially, there was only 2 characters in that. But they've, it looks pretty cool. I mean, apparently the stage gets a turn, so the stage hazards where I'm guessing like turrets and enemies and stuff that come up, and you collect weapons like the spread gun as you go through. It's got little miniatures. But my favourite thing about this is the box. I love the box. It's like a big, thick NES cart. And
thick with 2 C's. Another reference to thick. We keep on saying it.
Yeah, but interestingly, I couldn't... Maybe it's there, but I couldn't see the Konami logo anywhere. That's interesting.
Oh, another shout out to a special segment.
Why would it not have the Konami logo though? They own the IP.
But maybe
it's so weird.
Well, yeah, but they're not making this, right?
No, but just it's a win-win. Well, actually, or maybe not so much win-win having Konami's name out there, but why would you not? Why would you not have it there? You know what I mean? Like Konami would want the publicity.
Yeah, I get you.
And they, it's more legitimate if they have it on the box for the people that are making it. But hey, it's...
Well, I agree. They're a very logical and rational company that makes very logical decisions in all spaces. So I agree. Why wouldn't they do that?
That is not true, but I will forget that. I honestly, if this is the kind of thing, not that I'm playing many board games at the moment because they're all bunkered down in our houses, but I'd like to have this to play whenever, we do games nights and things, because it looks pretty cool. And it doesn't...
Yeah, it's a really cool one.
It doesn't look like it's going to take 4 hours like some of those board games do these days. So,
Yeah, and my style with these kind of things. I'll probably wait until board game. What is it called? Board Game Geek from
Yeah.
memory. What the reviews are like, and it doesn't need to be like a top tier tabletop game, but as long as it's not ridiculously bad, it's certainly something I'd be interested to pick up. Just because it's awesome. It's like a big throwback, and yeah, I was actually going to check. I wonder how that whole industry is going, because it could be kind of two-sided. Like, definitely you're not getting your mates to come over to play tabletop games, but a lot of people play these games with their family. So given that everyone's like locked down, or a lot of countries and a lot of people are locked down at the moment, maybe, tabletop, that whole industry is actually doing really well at the moment. I don't know.
It wouldn't surprise me if the really casual board game market has seen a nice jump, but I guess the more hobby grade level stuff and the big box games, I guess they call them, have seen a dip, because not only are people obviously not going around other people's houses, but a lot of people aren't financially very well off right now, and those games cost a lot of money. So I don't think they're probably purchasing many new games at the moment.
Yeah, and we didn't mention it, but there is a Mario themed Monopoly in honor of the 35th anniversary
Oh my
of Mario.
god, Mario Monopoly! Oh my god,
Another one.
I have a Mario Monopoly. There's like 10 of them or something at this point.
I know.
The one I
know.
have,
there
one
are...
I have is horrible. Like I remember I played it enough, like to know it's just like the worst application of Mario in a Monopoly form. And I've seen the like better ones out there. I'm like, why did I end up with this one?
And by the way, Monopoly is just such a bad game in the first place.
Look, I kind of agree, but it's still a part of me that enjoys it every now and then.
Monopoly is the Battletoads of tabletop games. It is. It's like, that's the best way to think of it. It's very, very bad. No, not very bad. It's just a bad tabletop game that is so popular, and it's insane.
All right.
And, I remember when I got introduced to all the German tabletop games, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I played Monopoly when I was a kid. I felt like it was child abuse or something.
Monopoly with house rules is okay. Normal Monopoly rules suck. That's my...
Yeah,
that's my
I agree with that. Yeah, no, that's fair. Grounded.
Yes. So we talked about Grounded last week because it was a feature, I guess, game in the Xbox showcase. So that's
a very cool trailer, a very fun trailer.
Yeah, Obsidian's co-op survival game that's been known about for a while, but the fact that the game was about to come out in the game preview program and is out now was obviously highlighted by them. But what's been discovered since the game's come out is it has a really cool feature that... The reason I want to talk about this is I don't think it's been done in a game before, or something like this. And I think that there's some awesome applications you can do for this. So it has an arachnaphobia slider. The idea with this is it's like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. You're these teenagers, but you're shrunk down to the size of, basically an ant, which means spiders are like huge. And like a lot of people are terrified of spiders, and I kind of understand that. I'm okay with that, but I also haven't come across like a giant spider in my house, and that's probably a bit terrifying if you come into that situation. But these are giant, and what this slider does is, as you start to move it down, it gets like less vile and gruesome and cuter as it goes along, to the point where it gets becomes this little white blob with eyes. And then I think the last one doesn't even show anything. It just kind of says there is something here or something. Like, it's weird. It's like it doesn't even have a physical form or something like that. But the reason I love this is not only is it just cool, the game is brimming with charm. I haven't played it myself, but I've watched some people streaming it co-op and things like that. And it's just like, even in the menu, it says quit, and then it says super quit. As in, like, quit to the menu and then quit the whole game. Just like, it's got really cool, like, little...
That should be standard. I like that.
And it's like the hardest difficulties, like, it goes like mild, moderate, and then whoa, and things like that. But the reason I really like this arachnophobia slider is just, like, has a game ever done this before?
Not that I know of. Like, and you know, I think it's pretty smart. I think there's, you know, we were kind of, I guess, volunteering last week that we're both a bit cowardly when it comes to horror games.
Exactly. You know where I'm going.
And
You
to
know
be
where
honest,
I'm going with this.
Well, yeah, I just kind of think, you know, maybe if you did have something like that, where it just like takes the edge off it a little bit. Like, I don't like the jump scares out of those horror games. I feel like they're a bit cheap, and I just don't like it. To be honest, I don't really like the jump scares in movies either. They're not the kind of horror films that I really like watching. So, yeah, I think it's a pretty cool feature.
Yeah, that's what has me the most excited is that if people take notice of this, you could apply this to anything like that. So, you know, not that you're going to say, okay, an Uncharted game is going to have a fear of height slide or anything like. At some point, it becomes kind of completely, you know, against what the point of the game is. But when it comes to, I know there's already obviously gore sliders, and they've been around for a long time. So I guess that is the closest, you know, like content filters and things like that. But if there is like a jump scare slider or a horror or slider for those games, so the thing with Resident Evil Remake on GameCube, the reason I stopped playing it is obviously I was super tense about it. But when I realized that every zombie that I'd killed, because I hadn't been blowing their heads up, you're going to turn into these super powerful versions of the zombies after like an hour.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah.
screw that. Like, I'm not. And not even the thought of starting the game over again. I'm just like, I'm done with this. I ended up giving the game away, which is to a friend. I will say to a friend that I knew loved the Resident Evil games. So I was cool with that. But I was just like, man, you could think of really cool applications for this. So good on you, Obsidian. And it's, I don't know, like I'd even be interested in trying that game out if there was anybody else that was interested in playing it. So,
well, yeah, I'm kind of interested to see if it's going to be on PC, the Xbox Game Pass PC beta thing.
I'm not sure. Do we know if it is or not yet?
Don't know. It's a little bit confusing. Like, and as much as I do love what Microsoft's doing, and I think actually just to call out and probably a shout out to you, you know, your perspective on the strategy around Microsoft and what they're doing, I think you're 100% right. I think they are trying to transition into service, and they kind of don't care. Like, they genuinely don't care if you want a Series X. You know, if you know, you got a PC and it makes sense to go Game Pass on that, go do it. Because that's something that I'm genuinely thinking about. So yeah, I would definitely play this if it comes to Game Pass PC. I mean, honestly, it actually might tip me over the edge if I was able to play it on Game Pass PC, to go and get Game Pass PC. So I don't know. Oh yeah, it says included with Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. Okay, I reckon I'll get this if I can get this on PC.
Oh, we should give it a shot sometime.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like, so one thing I should call out about this game is that it actually is getting reviewed fairly well on Steam, which, like, I kind of rate the way that Steam does their user reviews. So seems like positive reception so far to the game. So that's pretty cool. And a really, really good purchase from Microsoft to bring Obsidian into their realm.
Definitely.
Like, as long as they don't kind of repeat what they did with Rare and just let them be and kind of do their own thing, I think that it's going to reap a lot of benefits and dividends. So one thing that we did say initially was, like, we're probably not going to talk about movie and TV stuff too much, and I think every single week we've mentioned some adaptation.
It's the season for it. What can we say?
Well, and I do like talking about it. So two from Ubisoft, right, essentially. So Beyond Good and Evil. And then also, we'll talk about another property. I'm not wrong there, right? Ubisoft's Beyond Good and Evil.
Correct.
Yeah. So Beyond Good and Evil, very much a cult classic. You know, it was rumored and teased back in 2008. And then we had an official reveal. And even sequel, when I saw that...
we should say.
Yeah, sorry, the sequel. Yeah, Beyond Good and Evil 2. We had the reveal around E3 2017. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, okay. You know, sometimes with these big cult classics, when there is a sequel coming out and it kind of clicks with you, for me personally, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll jump in and get to know this. So there's a movie coming out through Netflix. So it's actually, is it the director from Detective Pikachu? Is that right?
I'm not sure if he's the director, but that's the properties he's worked on. Detective Pikachu and the Goosebumps movies.
Oh, okay. So it could be an EP or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one, but so it's meant to be apparently a live action animated feature. Like, makes sense if they're a lot of the characters in Beyond Good and Evil 1 and 2 are and I can never say this word. What is it? Anthropomorphic. Did I? That's a
Anthropomorphic,
horrible
yeah.
word to say. Like Paige, who's a pig, and like a giant pig that's like a mechanic, and then there's quite a few, I guess like hippo. I don't know if they're hippos or elephants. I think they're hippo characters, no, rhino characters. That's it. Rhino characters that you interact with. Lots of weird, charming characters. I am a huge fan of the first game. I played it. I bought it for GameCube. I repurchased it when they brought the HD version out on PlayStation, Xbox, and I'm really pumped for Beyond Good and Evil 2. It's a shame we haven't heard anything about it in a while. But what we saw of it when, last, like we saw a lot of it. So it was definitely really far along in certain respects then. So it's a shame that it's gone quiet since. But I'm really looking forward to the sequel.
Just odd that it's kind of odd, don't you think? Because I even went back and they had like a 40-minute playthrough of the game.
They showed heaps of the game.
Yeah, it's so weird, and it looked good. It looked good.
My only thought is the scale of that game is so big that they just need that amount of time. And Michel Ancel, I believe you pronounce it, who is famous for like the Rayman games and introducing rabbits and things, but he's behind Beyond Good and Evil, and it's the when it comes to, I guess, a movie based on it, you'd hope it's probably based on the first game, but you never know. It could be kind of to tie in with the Beyond Good and Evil 2, which is actually prequel. But it's the world they built is fantastic. You could make a really good series or movie with that world, and you don't even have to relate it to the central plot line of either to make something cool. So yeah, I would 100% watch that. But I will say, with any video game movie, it's always, well, wait until you see the trailer. But knowing Netflix's track record with that stuff, they usually deliver. Like they usually release what they say they're going to release. So
yeah, and it's amazing the amount of stuff they're releasing. Like, I'm very old school, so I still feel like they're not real movies, quote unquote. Not really that extreme, but you know what I mean by that. It doesn't feel the same as a Quentin Tarantino film coming out or something like that, but they are kind of getting into that space well and truly now, where I just have to treat it like, any other thing that's coming out. So, and I should just call out that Rob Letterman did write and direct Detective Pikachu, and I actually really loved that movie.
And it made a
I
ton
thought
of money,
for what it was.
so...
Yeah, and it was great. And I'm kind of actually surprised that he wasn't involved in the sequel, given he kind of helmed, like the fact that he wrote and directed the first one. Typically, people like that you think would want to craft the next story, but maybe sort of do one of those films and that maybe one enough, So yeah, no, I'm definitely interested to see this because I really like Detective Pikachu, and that universe is really interesting.
And you could you could definitely watch Beyond Good and Evil movie without playing the games. So
yeah, no, and that's what I'm intending to do. And then talking about another Ubisoft IP getting a bit of a translation into Netflix, Splinter Cell. So a Splinter Cell Netflix anime. Looks like it will be coming out. Have they set an announced date of when it will be coming?
I don't believe so. So the way they worded it was there's an order out for 2 seasons, which is essentially 16 episodes. And apparently they're being headed by the John Wick creator, Derek Kolstad. But this one is the most bizarre to me. Like Beyond Good and Evil, you probably wouldn't have expected that to be a movie, but it kind of makes sense in some ways. Splinter Cell anime is really weird, considering the Splinter Cell's always been in Ubisoft's back pocket. That they can pull a new Splinter Cell out at any time, and they'll have a hit on their hands, as long as obviously the game isn't trash. But from my understanding, the last one, Blacklist, which was in 2013, which is crazy, was really well received. I remember playing the demo for it and thinking, hey, this is a pretty solid game, but I'm just I'll say that, like, I've never been into that series. Just I think the original that came out on Xbox and probably on PC, I imagine as well, always looked cool. It always looked like, hey, this is a really cool take on a stealth series, when Metal Gear Solid's doing its own wacky stuff. But it's just, my wonder is are they pulling this together to kind of coincide with, maybe a game in the future? Because it kind of feels weird to do this and just not have put a game out for at least 7 years.
Well, yeah, and I know people are really looking forward to a new Splinter Cell game and kind of expected it for the next gen. And I think my gut feel would have been to say yes, or almost certainly, if they're releasing an anime on Netflix, they're going to have a game that's coming out with it. But then I look at Castlevania, and that came out in 2017, and we've heard nothing really about that, right? So
I wonder if that's got something to do with Konami, hey?
Oh yeah, that studio that used to make games. I mean, it'd be really interesting if we had a discussion about it at some point.
This is the most the most times we've I guess, prepared for a feature segment so far. It's just ridiculous. It's not like we're going to be talking about it for 6 hours or anything. So
I like it though; it's fun. So yeah, no, I always like these Netflix animes that they're making. They're pretty cool, and they're just really watchable. They make them in a way that even if you don't know that much about the franchise, you can just get really into it, and sort of it's easy to just get transported away. So yeah,
I wonder if they'll
get
Michael Ironside to voice. I imagine they'd have to, because that's Sam Fisher. That's Sam Fisher. They even got him to voice Sam Fisher's dialogue in the Ghost Recon Wildlands DLC, So I reckon they'll have to have Michael Ironside do the voice. Otherwise, people will be so disappointed.
It depends how much he's... I think it's almost more on him than anyone else. Is he going to come to the table with the right price or not, right? And then in news that I'd term as, the world sucks sometimes. Can't think of a better title for this segment.
Sometimes.
But I'm a positive, optimistic person fundamentally. So an actual emulator that we use to emulate, and we use this emulator to emulate Bonk's Adventure. So Byuu, or as he wanted to be referred to as Nia, he's actually retired from the emulation community, and for me, I would regard him as probably the greatest emulator programmer ever. So he's the guy, I've actually spoken about him before. He's the guy who created Higan and snes, and these emulators were almost 100% accurate emulators of the Super Nintendo. And he went to the point of actually getting the physical cartridges, dumping them, comparing pure inputs and outputs, and he's just a freak of nature. And he actually started to emulate the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64, and he was about 80% the way through. And from what I saw on his post on Twitter, it was he was well along. It could have actually become the best Nintendo 64 and PlayStation emulators, which they sorely need those emulators in that space. But what's happened is it's a really weird story, and I don't know all the details, and I guess it's a bit personal for him, but it seems that on Twitter, he'd maintained a list of emulator programmers who are on Twitter. And some of them are big, some of them are quite small. And some strange person out there has actually systematically gone through that list and used that list, because it's a public Twitter list, to harass and then actually dox a lot of these emulator programmers. Now, I have zero idea of why this occurred, and I would always argue you never have a right to harass people, so there's no logic anyway in what you're doing. But it has really hit this person really, really hard, Byuu, and to the point where people in the community are trying to keep him in the community, and it's it's not your fault, but he blames himself so much for this situation occurring that he just wants to kind of exit the whole scene completely because of this, which is an incredible shame. And it's sad that he feels so bad about what had happened. And hopefully eventually he looks to come back in the scene, but yeah, like, it's a real shame because I think he was, really having some promising results in the Nintendo 64 space. And, he's a real credit to the community. There's been articles written about him on Ars Technica and lots of other outlets. And, yeah, it's a real shame. And it's someone I don't think is well known. But he probably should be because I think he's had a huge impact to that scene and making it a lot easier for people to access old games and being able to play them and experience stuff in a modern format, in a very accurate format rather than a really dodgy emulator that you normally get. So, yeah, just wanted to kind of call that out.
Bloody arseholes, I tell you.
Yeah, it can be. So, going into the bargain bin. As we sort of really do start every single week with the PC, just because it's the most open platform, and the Epic Game Store. So the Epic Game Store right now, up to Thursday, after the time of publishing, 20XX, Barony, and Superbrothers Sword and Sworcery EP are free right now, as we mentioned last week that they would be free at this time. The week following that, we have Wilmot's Warehouse, a puzzle game. It looks pretty cool, actually. I might download and check this out.
So I know a lot about that game, and I suggest anyone that loves arranging things and has OCD tendencies, you should play that game.
Oh, okay. I'm going to get my wife to play it. And again, I love Epic Game Store. It's crazy how they just have this program of giving away free games. And one thing I'll call out next week, and I'll keep calling it out until it occurs, but Total War Saga Troy is going to be free for the first 24 hours when it launches. So I'd just put it in your diary. It's Thursday, the 13th of August, when that's going to happen. So log in that night or in the morning on the Friday, and that's free. And it's only going to be free for that first 24 hours. And that's actually a AAA game. So that's a game that, it's going to be full retail price. But just as a promotion, they're going to make it free for 24 hours on Epic. In terms of PlayStation, as part of your PlayStation Plus subscription, there was an announcement around the August games. So it's Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the campaign. So that's not the multiplayer, but that had gone free earlier. So the campaign Remastered is free and out right now. And for the month of August, Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout will be going free in a couple of days until the end of August. So as always, with these things, make sure you jump in and, just sort of click, buy, so then it's attached to your profile forever.
And with Fall Guys...
Have you played Fall Guys?
So I haven't, but it's blowing up a lot on YouTube. Obviously, they've had a very good marketing strategy with content creators and things. And I guess their approach is what Rocket League did. Send it out free. It relies on a multiplayer community. And I reckon Fall Guys... I don't know if it'll be long-lived, but I reckon you'll see it blow up for a little bit, and it will end up being really successful for Devolver, who were the publisher.
Yeah, it looks like the aesthetic is really awesome. Like, I really, really love the aesthetic. And as the Xbox guy, I'll let you cover the Xbox games with the gold.
Yeah, so for August, if you've got a gold account, which the majority of people should if they play anything online, you have Portal Knights on Xbox One, so that's free now until the 31st of August. A game called Override Mech City Brawl, which will be free from 16th of August to the 15th of September. And they've also got 2 original Xbox games up for grabs, which will be backwards compatible. And like a lot of original Xbox games, they should, I think they get upscaled slightly. So MX Unleashed, which is available now till the 15th, and Red Faction 2, which is available from the 16th of August to 31st of August. Now, first of all, Microsoft, get your head out your ass with these dates. Just make them all just 1st of August to 31st of August. What are you doing? Come on.
When you have to read them out, it seems ridiculous. Insane. And, this is how I always miss this kind of stuff, because it's like so odd. Like, you have to log in multiple times to be able to get them all.
So I've played a lot of Portal Knights. It's a good, fun game. It's very similar to Dragon Quest Builders, where it's obviously very inspired by Minecraft, but then has actual like objectives and worlds and things like that. Really fun. It's kind of ridiculous how overpriced that game is on Switch in retail. I think I've seen it for like $60 before. But Portal Knights is really fun, and the developers have done a lot to actually update the game. But the one I'm actually kind of interested here is Red Faction 2, because that game, the first and the second, had the really cool destructible environment and the lasers that could drill through the walls and stuff. So that'd be pretty cool to pick up and play on a modern console.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say that for me, this is a bit of a meh month
Oh,
for
it
Xbox.
is. Yeah,
Normally,
it is.
yeah, like because I'm more of a PlayStation guy, you're more of an Xbox guy. But I'd normally say that Xbox smashes PlayStation from the releases, but I think PlayStation's probably better this month with Fall Guys. So.
The games with gold has been very lacking for a while. Every now and then there's a good game, but at this point they're just running. I think they're just running out the titles because essentially Game Pass has taken that place for what people like to hear. So.
Yeah, and then with them kind of killing that 12-month subscription, it seems like we'll be hearing news about what's the future of that kind of thing very shortly. But going into a game that I believe, and kind of jealously believe, is available on the Game Pass. Is that right?
So,
CrossCode.
CrossCode. Now, I've been wanting to play this game for a long time. So, CrossCode originally came out on the PC in September 2018 and got a lot of buzz at the time. And it just came to all the console platforms in July. So, just essentially the last couple of weeks. It's an action role-playing game set in an MMO world. It's not an MMO, but it's, I guess, very similar to Sword Art Online and Dot Hack and those kind of games where they're essentially mostly single-player experiences, but set just in the narrative of an MMO. So they're developed by Radical Fish Games and published by Deck 13, and I love Deck 13 as a publisher and a developer. They make Lords of the Fallen and the Surge games. And it was actually originally crowdfunded on Indiegogo. So this is, I think, a really good example of a title that, that just really the whole crowdfunding concept has downsides and obviously some big wins. And I think this is a big win for the concept. So the game itself,
is it good? Like, because I'm super keen to know about this game. I feel like it could be really up my alley. So. The game's future hinges on you.
Yeah. So whenever I saw this game, whether or not it was trailers or screenshots, I kept hearing how good it was, and then I would look at it and think, yeah, it looks cool. It's it's a sprite based. It's basically like Secret of Mana, Terranigma kind of art style, just nicer. And I'm like,
yeah, Terranigma, that game that's quite common all over the world.
Well, the reason I mention it is because it's actually very reminiscent in some ways to me of the combat mechanics.
It does actually look like it. I'll give you that. It does. I just
and
looking
because
at it now,
the reason why it also reminds me of Terranigma is Terranigma, as he got further into the game, started incorporating modern world elements and cities, and like you'd walk into into a building and there's computers and desks and things. And this game has
it's such a good game.
This game has a lot of that. But when I was looking at it, I'm thinking, okay, but there's actually quite a few games out there like this. Why is this so good? And within the first 20-25 minutes, I realized why it's so good. It controls so nice. Like, you look at the game you think it's going to control like, Secret of Mana, Secret of Evermore, those kind of 2D action RPGs. But the range of movement's actually really nice. Like, it's interesting. You think those games that it's going to have, like, like the directional movement, you're going to go on diagonals, you're going to go up and down, left and right. But when you go sideways, there's actually more points of movement that you can do. So it actually feels really nice and smooth. And your character actually, when you go to turn, they actually like stop for a second as if, in a 3D game where you'd actually like put your leg out to then go the other direction. It controls so smooth, and it's got such a cool blend of action, mechanics, as well as puzzle mechanics. And so far, I'm about 5 hours into the game now. I love this game. I think it's fantastic.
Oh, wow.
I think it's absolutely awesome. I don't know if the plot will resonate with everyone, but I think the gameplay is a winner for anyone that kind of loves those old 2D action RPGs. I think automatically will find something to love in this game. It's very nice from a presentation standpoint, and it's got a lot going on, especially when you first start the game. You're in like this area with a lot of overlay effects. But what's pretty cool is you can actually customize a lot of that stuff. So you can actually turn off a lot of the extra visual elements if you want a cleaner experience. You go into the options menu and there's so many options in there. The people that have made this game, you can tell it's a labor of love. They've spent so long to just put so much into it. And what's really cool is just some nice features. Not that it's completely unique to this game, but so you're running around fighting enemies, and what will happen is you will start getting, when you kill a certain amount of enemies, as long as within a certain amount of time, you'll go up a rank. And then if you keep going up that rank, and there's like a cooldown timer that if, it runs out, then your rank will reset, then the enemies will start dropping better loot. So what you end up doing is you end up running through these pretty big zones that are made up of like smaller maps, but it carries across the zones. So you will actually like be rushing through and just like fighting enemies as quickly as you can, just so you can get better drop loot. And it makes it's, I wouldn't say grinding as much, because so far I'm only, as I said, 4 or 5 hours in, and I haven't had to grind or anything, but it's really fun. And I'm really looking forward to playing more. And I think the story has potential, but it's very quirky. There's a lot of humor to it. And, sometimes humor can be very different for different people when it comes to, video games. So I think it's fantastic, and I think it needs more attention, honestly.
Interesting, man. Interesting. So, like, I'm in the process of signing up to Xbox Game Pass
Right
Ultimate.
now, like he's literally clicking right now.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Like, it's crazy, man. Yeah, like, like this whole game, I just keep on hearing such a good rap from everyone. Like, it's insane. I can't believe like how many people are calling it out and going, "Oh, you got to play this game. It's such a good game."
What really surprised me about the game actually is there's so much depth to the environment. So you think it's a 2D game, you kind of know what to expect. It goes above and beyond in that. You are jumping on different levels in the environment, and you're very mobile in that game. So what's really cool is in an early part of the game, similar to Super Metroid, how there's that part where you'll see the animals like bouncing off the walls.
Yeah, the space animals.
And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, so I can do something like that. They kind of do something like that where you see all these people jumping across the platforms in the area. You're like, oh, that's neat, because you see other players running around because it's meant to be like an MMO, but they're not everywhere. But you'll see them, coming past, and you see them like just running around the terrain and jumping from hill to hill, and like, oh, awesome. So that kind of just teaches you in an organic way that you're meant to actually do this stuff. And there's tons of secrets like that. It's just really, really cool, and I'm looking forward to if you do get a chance to play it, and to see what your thoughts are. What I will say is the game, has a tutorial that kind of is woven into the narrative and lasts for about an hour at the start. That it's good, but it can take a while to. Sometimes you're like, okay, just let me out in the world. So that's probably the only negative so far that I've got of it. And a weird, very specific thing I wish it did is the game has a lot of systems. It is very much an RPG in so many ways. But I do wish that it had the quality of life option that most RPGs have these days, which is an optimize button. So when you're looking at your equipment, a lot of games will have, okay, I've got all these different pieces of equipment, but the game has a way to just say, okay, optimize, equip everything that's the best that I have at the moment.
Oh, like, and inventory management's like fit the most optimal fit out or something like that.
And most games will have that these days. The thing is, obviously, depending on how the equipment works, and we'll see, as I play more into the game, it's always going to have extra, like a piece of equipment might be by, like standard defense might be better, but, it has these extra elements that are kind of cool. But I'm cool. If you're not having trouble with the game, I'm cool for the majority of the game just to say, okay, just optimize, equip the best stuff I've got so I don't have to sit there going through it all. And then as I get close towards the end of the game, or I start having any rough patches, then I'm actually going to start looking at, okay, I need to equip something that's better at resisting this and things like that. So,
Yeah.
but in saying that, it has a lot of other quality of life things that are really neat. So it's just the one very specific thing that I'm used to because I play a lot of RPGs that I wish it had. So,
Oh no, it sounds awesome. Sounds amazing. I guess I'm looking forward to playing it now, I should say, because I'm going to sign up to this as soon as I confirm that it's definitely on. So yeah, CrossCode. Okay. Oh no, wait, it's not on PC. That's so weird. That's so weird, man. It's only available on Xbox One in the Game Pass, even though it is on PC as a PC game.
So what I would do is just wait probably a month and it will be on there. That's generally how it works.
Okay.
So,
okay, I'll do that then. And then I'll probably sign up so I can play Grounded as well. Cool. Awesome. So I wanted to flag a concept with you and then actually circle back next week. So the idea is, the way that we both play games, like you definitely play more modern games than I do, but generally we won't play every single modern game that comes out in the year. So we will have perspectives on games that come out in 2020, but as opposed to, I think, a lot of other people who could genuinely say, this is, Bigwig's Game of the Year for 2020, I don't think we'll be saying that, like at this stage at least, I don't think. But one idea that I did have is instead, if we pick a year back in the past, so like a rewind, and do a Game of the Year 2020 for the year 2010 or something like that, or something trying to make it as confusing as possible. So yeah, like I just wanted to sort of float it out there, get your thoughts, and then thought if you did like it, then we should come back next week with proposals, maybe 3 proposals each on years that we want to do and why, and then hash it out live.
Yeah, I love the idea, and it's interesting. So I've kind of gone through the last 20 years or so and just kind of looked at, what games are within this year, and there are some big years.
There's some really big years.
And what's interesting is the last, I'd say 10, a lot of the big games, I've played a lot of them, but there's a lot of them that are, Sony exclusives that I never played. And what's interesting about that is if we choose that, then I'd need to obviously find a way to actually play your Uncharted 2 or something like that. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But what I found interesting is the more you go back, the bigger those years get. And I guess that's just because that's when we grew up. They're the games that hold special place in our heart. Like you start looking at the SNES years, and you're like, oh my god, like that! All these games came out this year. It's insane, So
yeah, and maybe as a bit of a rule, because I was thinking about this, because I've already come up with some suggestions, and I'm just trying to hone it down, and I'm trying to make it more like eras rather than all clustered in the same period of time. But I think just on the year, because like we are from Australia, we receive things in different times than US and Japan. So some games are legitimately like released over the course of essentially 3 years. I think just to make it simple, like we probably should just stick to North America release dates, because that's kind of what you commonly see online. Like when you see summaries or Metacritic or whatever, I think it's just going to make our lives easier. And then I think we do a bit of manual work to reject certain games. So for instance, one of the years I was looking at, it had Mass Effect 2 in the year, and I'm like, Mass Effect 2 didn't come out that year. And then I realized they were counting the PlayStation release of Mass Effect 2 as Mass Effect 2 had come out in that year. So, I mean, we'll probably talk about the rules next week, but I think it's kind of like the year that people know, or like it's kind of like regarded as like the year that it came out in North America, like on the first platform it came out on. I think that's kind of the rough rule that I have in my head.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was looking at a certain game, and I'm like, okay, what year does this game fall in? Because it's a game I love, and I'm like, okay, maybe I can kind of tip the ballot a bit. But it came out in different years for European territories, and it did, which Australia falls under. Then it did North America. I'm like, well, I guess we'd have to go to North America. So. But I think it's a great idea. As you said, we're I'm not going to be playing The Last of Us 2, honestly, probably this year. Maybe in the future, I might play a lot of the games that I've missed on other platforms. And that's a game that whenever you talk about a game of the year, you'd have to talk about that game. So
Yeah.
I love the idea, and I think it's going to be interesting because, as you said, the more modern, especially the 360 era, there's a lot of games that I know you haven't played, but I know as we go back older, you would have played the majority of the games that the big ones then. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm honestly, if necessary, I'm considering picking up maybe a PS3 or something because.
Oh,
Because I've always planned on doing that. That's how I've actually always
yeah.
played PlayStation series consoles. So I own a PlayStation and a PlayStation 2, but I bought them when it was the next generation. So we're well obviously into the PS4 now, and I never actually went and got myself a PS3. But there's a whole bunch of, I'm not even talking about those big games, but like your Personas and things like that I never played. So yeah, I think it's yeah. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. So we'll circle back as a special feature next week because knowing you and I will get into a heated debate about what year we should pick and what year would have the most value to pick and debate. But for this week's main special feature, we have Konami. And I believe that you're going to give a retrospective or your thoughts on this small little Japanese company.
Oh, what a surprise. We're talking about Konami? Really? Oh, man. Who
Konami,
would have known?
We should have flagged it earlier. We should have flagged it earlier.
We talked about Contra. We talked about Castlevania. Oh, man. Yeah, Konami. Look, I'm not going to give a history over about it. Everyone that is into games knows Konami.
I thought you were going to be like Norm from the Game Historian.
Nah.
That's what I was ready to receive.
You're ready to receive Norm. Okay, all right. I'll remember that. There we go. That's the episode title. So, look, the reason I wanted to talk about Konami is actually not because we're talking about a Contra board game or by chance the Castlevania anime series came up. It's actually because there was a news story this week that they're actually entering the PC gaming hardware market. Now, if they've actually released them before in the past, then I'm not sure about that, but it was a big enough news story and people are surprised. And I thought, what the hell is going on with Konami at this point? There's all the jokes, the F Konami news from Jim Sterling and everything like it. We all joke about it, and then there's obviously the topics which I'll mention that are less joking about how they've treated employees and the whole Hideo Kojima stuff. But what are they doing right now? So, if anyone doesn't know, obviously Konami is a Japanese developer, but they've been around since 1969, and they clearly just don't make video games, because if they were just making video games at this moment, they wouldn't be in business because they haven't put any out in so long. But they make trading cards, anime, live action, things like Godzilla style stuff. But they make a lot of their money from slot machines and pachinko machines. So I've actually been in a pokies venue in Australia and seen Konami logos on the side of the pokey machines. So yeah,
oh, really?
100%. Yeah,
cool.
and it's so obviously that's a big market to be in the gambling industry. Whether or not I'm very much against pokies personally, but it's a big business. Whether or not, and it brings in a lot of money for governments and everything like that. So Konami's got their finger in that pie. So, but in terms of video games, I mean, last year they released the Arcade Classics Anniversary Collection, Castlevania as an Anniversary Collection, and the Contra Anniversary Collection. Interestingly, I actually own two of those, so I've been contributed to their income for that year. But the only new game, at least on console, that they actually brought out was Contra Rogue Corps, or Rogue Core, I should say. And look, as much as everyone was excited, oh my god, there's a new Contra, by all accounts, you have to struggle to find anything positive said about that game online. It seems like they completely dropped the ball with that game. And I love Contra. I love Super Contra, Contra 1. I love Super Pro Protector, which is Contra 3, outside of Australia. I love those games. I even love Contra Hardcore as well on the Genesis, even though I only ever played that on emulator. But this year, they've released even less. So they've released like DLC updates for Pro Evolution Soccer, which is the big money maker, which is called Winning 11 in Japan.
Yeah, but just on that though, they also dropped the ball with that. Like they kind of basically said, look, we're really looking at the next gen version of that game. So we're sort of giving a discounted version of the game. It's like crazy.
Yeah, it's basically just roster updates, by all accounts.
Yeah.
And
like it's literally dialing it in. Like literally.
And depending on when it comes out, potentially that Stadia Bomberman game, because they own the Bomberman franchise. So that's from such a renowned developer in years past, at least. What is going on there? Like they haven't even you wouldn't. I think they've done ports to mobiles. Like I'm not talking about mobile specific stuff at this point because it gets very murky there, and a lot of that stuff doesn't even come to Western mobile platforms. But just to kind of give an idea to people that aren't exactly sure what they have under their umbrella, you've got the big hitters. So you've got your Castlevania. We mentioned Contra. Dance Dance Revolution, right, which is obviously more of an arcade thing. Pro Evolution Soccer we mentioned. Then, of course, Metal Gear and Silent Hill, these huge franchises. Now, something like Metal Gear, obviously there's a complication that Kojima doesn't work there anymore, and they tried their hand at something without him, and it didn't go so well. Metal Gear Survive. But then they've also got, we talked about Bomberman, right? At least they're doing something with him. But, they've got Frogger, Gradius, Mystical Ninja, Suikoden, we mentioned that Eiyuden Chronicles. They haven't released a new Suikoden game in how bloody long? Just the...
Well, yeah, and you can see why there's a spiritual successor.
Exactly.
I mean, they're the studio of spiritual successors.
Exactly, and even just random things like Bloody Raw franchise, not that that's going to make them a lot of money, but Rocket Knight, the Zone of the Enders have got so many cool IPs that they're not doing anything with. And what if...
Oh, and it's beyond cool IPs though. I mean, if you take Metal Gear and Castlevania, they're probably up there as S tier IPs.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Legitimate, maybe in the industry you have, I don't even know what the number is, 20 IPs of that level. And it's genuinely, they have those. And then they have, like you're saying, a suite of others that people would kill for.
There's not going to be a AAA Adventure Island game anytime soon, but it's still an IP you have. Or at least, I should say these are franchises that have released in the past. If some of those IPs have moved around, then I'm not sure. But my understanding is a lot of these are still with them, right?
Well, in Silent Hill.
Yeah.
Silent Hill is, outside of Resident Evil, is probably still regarded as maybe the second best horror franchise. I can't really think of anything that would be competing with it.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And what a lot of people have said, and I agree, is they should... If they're not going to use this IP, first of all, obviously there's business to be made, and sometimes it doesn't make sense, the business decisions, but why aren't they not at least getting other developers to make games of these, right, and publish them? The thing is, I understand that they probably don't have the dev teams they would have had when they're making those big titles. It's not like... Interestingly, I've got some stories about that from a while back, but they're not going to have these big devs just lying around doing nothing if they're not making games. So I understand it's not like you can just start making AAA games at the drop of a hat, but you've got these IPs that are huge, and if not, why don't you actually offload some of them? It's so as people complain about Capcom all the time, but oh my god, Capcom is they're saints compared to Konami in terms of how they treat their IP. At least...
Well, I think that's more recent as well, right? They've done a lot of good things recently. I think if you talked about this maybe 2 years ago, it'd be pretty close. But yeah, Konami's gotten worse and Capcom has delivered a lot more recently.
I still think they'd still be far and above how Konami have acted. When I'm talking about Konami, I'm talking probably the last 4 years, right? It's they're just.
Yeah.
It's like they have just dropped off the face of the planet in terms of video game development. And as a
No,
as a
and
kid,
it does.
I would love seeing the Konami screen, like playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Tournament Fighters, and Super Probotector, and the Konami logo would come up on screen with the white background, the orange and the red. I'd be like, oh man, this is awesome! I love Konami, and they're just, you almost expect studios to close down. They've just kind of just faded into nothing at this point from a video game standpoint.
I mean, they made so many good games that they had to make up a separate publisher and studio and lie and say it was as if it was from someone else, because Nintendo had limits on how many games a single publisher could release. But they were just like sending out bangers. Like outside of Nintendo, I mean, question without notice, outside of Nintendo, off the top of your head, you'd probably take Konami as the best publisher. Like, and including all the games that aren't officially called Konami, but are actually Konami games. I can't think of another publisher outside of Nintendo that I'd take the suite of games as like, that would be the best
Well,
library.
definitely, especially from a Japanese standpoint. Like, I love a lot of Square's output, but Square also, make a lot of games that I'm not fond of. And with Konami, just when you just look at Castlevania and Contra, and I love the Metal Gear series, it's like, man, what happened? And
Well, okay, can I explain it to you?
okay, go ahead.
So, okay, like, I'm a financial person. It's actually pretty simple. It's pretty simple. This company is not a gaming company. This company, it literally is referred to as a gambling equipment company in Japan. And when you're talking about it in financial press, it makes about 10% of its money from gaming. So, like, and I don't mean like gambling. So I'm talking about video games.
I know,
It makes about 10% from video games. The problem is like the way it's structured, and like this is kind of like what happens in these kind of companies. And yes, they could sell off their IP. I wouldn't be shocked if they did that. I don't think they will, and I don't think that's a logical thing to do either. But essentially, what's happening is their gaming, so video game division. Just looking at some of the financial results, it's actually kind of humming along pretty well. Like it's actually sort of, having 5% year on year increases. So from a P&L perspective, it's actually not doing too poorly, the gaming division. So it's not a division that you go, oh, get rid of this division because it's suffering or losing money or going down the drain. It's actually still making money. So whatever they're doing from a P&L perspective, like re-releasing a lot of these old games, putting them in packages, people are buying them.
But they're
So
not
if
even
you're
doing
like,
that this year. That's the thing is like the output this
I know,
year is so
but like,
pitiful.
I know, but as like ultimately, that's not saying that they're not selling games, right? So they could still be selling games that they released last year that, people are buying Switches. Oh yeah, I love these old Contra games. Oh yeah, I love these old games, that Konami released. They're buying them, Castlevania recently, all that kind of stuff. And, if you're the board, shareholders, CEO, 10% of your company and it's just humming along, you just don't care about. Like that's ultimately what happens. And they would not be thinking about this. And that's why I kind of look at it and go, they're not going to do anything with their IP until they start to really suffer and that division starts to lose money. Because it's still making money, by the way. It's still making healthy profit, that division. They're not going to do anything with it. So unfortunately, from my perspective, unless they have someone internal in the company that becomes a real champion to change this, and sort of looks at it and goes, you know what, guys, there's a huge opportunity here. We can make a lot more money. Yes, it won't be the equivalent of our gambling part, but, we could easily double what we're making in this space. It's just not going to like move the needle internally. So unfortunately, I feel like they kind of need to really, really suffer from their video game division before they'll see change. And like my prediction based on looking at these numbers, we're probably going to just keep seeing what they're doing for many years to come. Like this is something that takes a long time to turn around. So unfortunately, I reckon it could be like another 4 or 5 year thing where they don't really do anything with their IPs in a really effective way.
And it's so true, but it's such a shame. And you've got to think at some point that some of this stuff starts to devalue, just in line with the reputation of them as a developer. That reputation is shot at the point. I know that it's been shot for a while. It's No, I don't think they're, for instance, I don't see them making a new Metal Gear for a while. Just simply because
Oh
of,
yeah, after Metal
yeah,
Gear Survive, yeah.
and just, everything that, like, as much as, love or hate Kojima, he was so integral to the backbone and the DNA of the Metal Gear series that it's kind of hard to really
Yeah.
move on from that. It's but it's just a shame looking at it from, I guess, from the perspective as, okay, a whole bunch of these are franchises that you love, and they're just dwindling there. They're just, nothing's happening. And look, I'll say, as I said, I bought the Castlevania Anniversary Collection. I bought the Contra one. I actually think I bought the Contra one on Xbox. Realized it was on special on Switch and bought it there as well, because I'm like, well, actually, I'm going to prefer to play that, handheld. And
Yeah.
and just playing those games is also, like, I was playing through Castlevania Bloodlines. I never played that. It was only on the Genesis, or at least it wasn't on the SNES. I'm like, man, like, these games are so good, and it's just a shame that nothing's happening with them. At least we do have your Bloodstained, and we've got, hopefully Eiyuden Chronicles is also good. So, we're getting to relive some of that. Get the, our fix from other sources there, and obviously Igarashi, behind the Bloodstained series, he was so critical to, the Symphony Night and onwards era of Castlevania. But it's just such a shame that, I would, like, outside of Bomberman, because I think, Bomberman's got such appeal, and, people don't think of Bomberman as a Konami game. It was, it was from Hudson originally. It's just a shame that, that we're not going to get a lot of new games from them for a while. Like, I'd love to see a new Rocket Knight game. The last Rocket Knight game they made, which was on Xbox 360, I'm guessing it was also on PS3, was fantastic. It probably wasn't developed by them, but obviously it was published by them. I'm like, Goemon or Mystical Ninja, these are kind of games, franchises I love, and we're not going to see any new game from them if they don't do something. And that just sucks, man. It just sucks.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, like, there's the analytical side, like, what do I think will happen, and is it logical from a financial point of view? Like, it's very logical from a financial point of view what they're doing, but from just a lover of games, like, it sucks. Like, I'm a huge handheld fan, and probably Metroidvanias are, like, maybe that's my favorite genre, and the trilogy of Castlevania games on the Game Boy Advance, which I'll be playing in my Analogue Pocket next year. They're my jam, man. Those games, that trilogy, like, I played the hell out of those games. Like, I love them so much. Like, I actually booted one of them up recently, and I was just like, wow, I can't believe how much of this is flooding back to me. Because I just played them religiously, like, on the trains and at uni and everything. So, yeah, like if they announced a new Castlevania game, maybe like a Symphony of the Night, or like even a more pared back version, as like a new game, like, I would be going insane about that. Like, that would be, I'd probably pay full retail price for that game if it was just the same experience. Like, I would love that. I would definitely play that.
Have you played Bloodstained yet?
So on that, I wanted to play it on the Switch because, if it's sort of like on multiple platforms and it's around the same price, I generally like to play it on the Switch just because of the portability. And, also being a dad, it actually is really critical to be able to just step out of a game really quickly. And I love that about the Switch, that you just press the power button and it, like, freezes the game. It's something that most people probably don't care that much about, but to me, that's become a huge thing that's helpful. Just how it landed on there, it just was so poor. I was like, wow, okay. I probably won't get it on that. I'm kind of holding out because I know they are updating it. If they can get an update that's pretty similar, like, I'll look to play it. But if they can't, then I'll probably just go and get it on either PC or PlayStation 4, or I guess, whatever the next consoles are.
Yeah, and because I've only played the first couple of hours of that game, and they delivered on that. What can you say? But it's still just, like, I'd love a new Mystical Ninja game. Like, we haven't had one in so long. I'm not expecting to ever get one. It'd be cool if they even made a collection or something of that. But it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's just it's one of those situations where it's understandable from the business standpoint, but it just sucks. It just sucks.
And it does, and it's like it's a bit unfortunate because I feel like the most logical course of action would be like the real thing that could happen is like a Sony or Microsoft buy the IPs for like, $4 billion or whatever it would have to be. It'd have to be big numbers. And it kind of just doesn't make sense because Sony doesn't need it. And Microsoft, I think, would. Like, imagine if Microsoft had Konami's IPs. Like, Microsoft, the exclusive place to play Castlevania, Metal Gear. Like, that's insane, right?
I wish... Look, they don't have the money for it, but I wish Capcom somehow could buy them. Or at least...
Oh, that's
I
never
know
going
it's
to
never
happen.
going to happen, but like to me, they would be the perfect developer to take the reins.
But I'm trying to talk about something in the realm of reality.
To me, it's not that unrealistic that they could potentially, like essentially what they do. They've done it before with many Konami titles. Is just license the title out, get another developer to make it. Why not do that?
But it's not likely to happen because they're still making money. And I guess what I was trying to say before is you got to realize this is a very minor part of their business that is humming away nicely. So from a dollar sense, they just look at it and go, "Oh, it's going fine."
What you're saying, but I'm saying I think that because they've done that before, that is a possible scenario as opposed to selling the IP. They've for instance. Contra, there was a Hardcore Uprising, right? It was a Contra game, but it was kind of a spiritual sequel in a way to Hardcore. But it was, and that was made by a different developer, And surely there's a revenue model where that makes sense, where they don't take on the burden of the development, but they're able to at least get financial gain out of it.
Yeah, sure. Like, from a strategic point of view, like for me, they need to tap into people that love these IPs that have demonstrated experience and ability to make these styles of games in the past. You know what I mean? Like, and there's a lot of, like the way forwards of the world, like a lot of these people who have made Metroidvanias. Like you go, hey, here's Castlevania. Do you want to make $1 billion? Here's a pretty good way to do it. But again, the fact that they're not doing that indicates to me the leadership is just not interested in doing that. And until there's an internal sponsor and that changes, it's just not going to happen, unfortunately. Unless there is, like I was saying, a big offer on the table from one of the, major players in consoles to try to get the IP off them. But I think the fact that Microsoft, is a Washington-based company versus... you've got Sony is Japanese. They don't really need the IPs as much as Microsoft does. And you haven't had a lot of history with, American companies buying this kind of stuff from Japanese companies. So can't really see that happening. I know it's been rumored a lot, but I think that's more speculation than a real rumor. So yeah, it sucks. And unfortunately, I don't see it changing anytime soon. I can't see Metal Gear 6 happening. And I know, how people were talking about PT getting revived. I never believed that. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I just want someone to do something with these franchises, and at some point, it's I'm sure it will happen at some point for some of them, but I worry about those littler franchises that are nothing's ever gonna happen with them. And not saying there should be a new Parodius game, but like that's what I said, like just something like Zone of the Enders, that's I know that's another Kojima kind of baby there, but these franchises, outside of potential remasters and releases, they're probably never going to see new titles, so that's a shame.
Not for a while. Now, one thing I will call out is outside of situations where the creators have specifically said you cannot make further entries in this IP. And I call that out because that's what's happened with Back to the Future. The people who created that have actually put in like their will that you can't make further Back to the Future movies because they just don't want to see it happen, which is quite interesting. But I think, from a capitalism perspective, if you have a very strong IP that has a big rabid fan base, eventually something's going to be made from it. You know, when they talked about Star Wars and they won't make any more Star Wars films, they're always going to make Star Wars films until we're dead. Just because it's got like a pull to it, you know? And I think especially Castlevania and Metal Gear and to a lesser degree Silent Hill, but I'd say particularly those two, they have such a pull from people. They will make further games in the future. They will make a Metroidvania, Castlevania eventually. But, you know, I don't think it's going to be anytime soon, unfortunately, which kind of is a bit of a bummer.
Oh, well, here's hoping something happens.
Well, on that very shiny note, it sort of wraps up the podcast for this week. So if you do want to reach out to us, you can hit us up on bigwigpod@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter on @bigwigpod. And if you do want to see the community grow and you want to see this audience grow, make sure you give us a 5-star review or a thumbs up on your podcast service because that helps people find us. With that, bye-bye.